The rifle aimed straight at the dying horse's skull, and the only thing standing between life and death was a woman in a ruined wedding dress that nobody wanted. What happens when fate delivers you to a frontier town as someone's bride, only to abandon you there broken and alone? When the man who sent for you is already dead, and the whole territory treats you like garbage? This is the story of Evelyn Mercer, a woman who arrived with nothing and changed everything. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach wheels ground to a halt in front of Black Hollow's general store, kicking up a cloud of dust that settled over everything like a burial shroud. Evelyn Mercer stepped down onto the packed dirt street wearing a cream-colored wedding dress that had once been beautiful. Now it was just stained and wrinkled from 3 weeks of travel across half the country. She was 26 years old, too old to be unmarried back in Philadelphia, according to her family. Too desperate to be picky about her options. The advertisement had been simple enough. Rancher seeking wife, strong constitution required. Reply to Thomas Whitmore, Black Hollow, Texas territory. She'd replied. He'd sent money for passage. And now here she stood, carrying one battered leather trunk and wearing a dress she'd sewn herself for a wedding to a man she'd never met. The driver tossed her trunk down without ceremony. That'll be Black Hollow, miss. Such as it is. Evelyn looked around. Black Hollow wasn't much to speak of. A dozen buildings scattered along a wide dirt road, most of them leaning slightly to one side as if the wind had been trying to knock them down for years and had almost succeeded. The saloon looked the sturdiest of the bunch, which probably said everything you needed to know about the town's priorities. A man in a dark suit approached from the church, his expression already apologetic. That's when Evelyn knew something had gone wrong. Miss Mercer? He removed his hat. I'm Reverend Hartley. Reverend. Evelyn forced a smile. I'm here to meet Thomas Whitmore. Is he... I'm afraid I have difficult news, Miss Mercer. The Reverend's voice carried the practiced gentleness of someone who delivered bad news often. Thomas passed away 2 weeks ago. Fever took him quickly. The words hit her like a physical blow. Evelyn stood there in the middle of the street, her entire future collapsing around her while strangers began to gather and stare. She'd sold everything she owned to make this trip. She had $17 left to her name and nowhere to go. I see, she managed. Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. The funeral was last Tuesday, the Reverend continued. He was a good man, well respected. I'm terribly sorry you came all this way for nothing. For nothing. The words echoed in her head. A woman in an expensive green dress emerged from the general store, followed by 2 others dressed almost as finely. They looked at Evelyn the way you'd look at a stray dog, with pity mixed with disgust. That's her? The woman in green said, not bothering to lower her voice. The mail-order bride? Poor thing came all the way from back east, one of her companions whispered. What's she going to do now? Well, she certainly can't stay here dressed like that. It's indecent. Evelyn's cheeks burned. She'd worn the dress because she'd thought she was getting married today. Now it just made her look like a fool. Is there a hotel? She asked the Reverend quietly. There is, but... He shifted uncomfortably. Miss Mercer, I don't know what resources you have, but Black Hollow isn't a town with many opportunities for a woman in your situation. There's no teaching position available. No, I can work, Evelyn interrupted. I'm not afraid of hard work. The Reverend looked doubtful. I'll ask around. But the truth is, most folks here are barely scraping by themselves. Over the next 3 days, Evelyn learned exactly how unwanted she was. She went to every business in town. The general store didn't need help. The saloon owner took one look at her and laughed. The hotel keeper offered her a room for one night, but made it clear she'd have to find somewhere else after that. The seamstress already had an assistant. The boarding house was full. By the 4th morning, Evelyn was down to $9 and sleeping in a storage room behind the church that the Reverend had reluctantly offered. She'd stopped wearing the wedding dress. It only invited more cruel comments, but her 2 other dresses weren't much better. Worn and patched, they marked her just as clearly as poor and desperate. She was eating bread and cheese for the 3rd meal in a row when she overheard 2 men talking outside the general store. Crow's looking for someone to help at the ranch house, one said. Good luck finding anyone willing to work for that bastard, the other replied. Man's got a disposition like a rattlesnake. Still pays well, though. Better than anyone else around here. Evelyn set down her bread and walked over. Excuse me, did you say someone named Crow is hiring? The men looked at her with surprise. One of them, an older cowboy with a graying beard, sized her up. Caleb Crow owns the biggest ranch in the territory. But I wouldn't recommend. Where is it? About 8 miles northwest. He pointed toward the horizon. But miss, Crow Ranch ain't no place for a lady. Caleb runs it like a military camp, and the men who work there are rough as they come. I need work, Evelyn said simply. Can I walk there in a day? The cowboy exchanged glances with his companion. You could hire someone to drive you out there. Cost you maybe $2. Evelyn had $9. She needed to make them last. I'll walk. Miss? But she was already heading back to the church to collect her things. The walk took 6 hours. Evelyn started before dawn, carrying everything she owned in her trunk, which got heavier with every mile. The Texas landscape stretched out endlessly in all directions. Dried grass, scattered mesquite trees, and a sky so vast it made her feel like an insect crawling across the earth. By midday, her shoulders ached and her feet were blistered inside her worn boots. By mid-afternoon, she was convinced she'd made a terrible mistake, but she kept walking because there was nothing else to do and nowhere else to go. Just when she thought she might collapse, she saw it. Crow Ranch sprawled across the horizon like a small kingdom. The main house was a massive 2-story structure built from dark wood and stone, with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. Behind it stood the bunkhouse, several barns, storage buildings, and a network of corrals that seemed to go on forever. Dozens of cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see men on horseback moving between the buildings. It was the largest operation she'd ever seen. Evelyn walked up the long drive, acutely aware that several ranch hands had stopped working to watch her approach. They didn't look friendly. Most of them looked like they'd been carved from the same hard landscape, weathered, rough, and completely unforgiving. She set down her trunk near the main house and walked toward a group of men gathered by one of the corrals. They were watching something inside it, their expressions tense. "Excuse me," Evelyn called out. "I'm looking for Mr. Crow." One of the men turned. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull, and a face that suggested he'd been in more than his share of fights. "Who's asking?" "My name is Evelyn Mercer. I heard there might be work available here." Several of the men laughed. The big one looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "This ain't no place for a woman, lady. Turn around and go back to wherever you came from." "I can't do that." Evelyn straightened her spine. "I need work, and I'm not afraid of hard labor. If Mr. Crow is hiring—" "Crow," someone shouted from inside the corral. "We got a problem here." The men's attention snapped away from Evelyn. She moved closer to see what was happening inside the corral and stopped short. A massive black stallion was cornered against the far fence, his eyes rolling white with terror. 3 men were trying to approach him with ropes, and the horse was absolutely losing his mind, rearing, striking out with his front hooves, teeth bared. "Easy now," one of the cowboys said, swinging a rope. "Just let us." The stallion charged. The cowboy dove to the side, barely avoiding being trampled. The horse slammed into the fence with enough force to crack one of the railings, then spun around and charged again. "Somebody get a goddamn rifle," the big man shouted. "That animal's gonna kill someone." "Hold on." A new voice cut through the chaos, calm, deep, and absolutely commanding. Evelyn turned and saw him for the first time. Caleb Crow was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his mid-30s, with dark hair and a face that might have been handsome if it hadn't been so hard. He wore work clothes like his men, dusty pants, a worn shirt, boots caked with mud. But there was something about the way he moved that set him apart. Authority radiated from him like heat from a forge. He climbed over the corral fence and dropped down inside with the panicked horse. "Boss, don't—" "Everyone out," Caleb said. "Now." The 3 cowboys scrambled over the fence. Caleb stood alone in the corral with 1,000 pounds of terrified, violent horse. Evelyn watched, barely breathing. Caleb didn't approach the stallion. He didn't raise a rope or make any threatening moves. He just stood there, completely still, and waited. The horse pawed the ground, snorting. His ears were pinned flat against his skull, a clear warning. But Caleb didn't move. "What's he doing?" Evelyn whispered. "Getting himself killed," the big man muttered. But slowly, impossibly slowly, the stallion's posture began to change. His ears flicked forward, then back, then forward again. He stopped pawing, his head lowered slightly. Caleb took 1 step forward. The horse tensed but didn't bolt. Another step. The stallion's nostrils flared, breathing in Caleb's scent. Caleb extended his hand, palm down, and held it there. The horse stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. Then, finally, he stretched his neck forward and touched his nose to Caleb's hand. "I'll be damned," one of the cowboys breathed. Caleb stroked the horse's nose once, then turned and walked back toward the fence, as calmly as if he'd been taking a Sunday stroll. The stallion didn't charge, didn't even move. When Caleb climbed out of the corral, his expression was hard. "That horse isn't vicious. He's been mistreated, probably beaten half to death before he ended up here. You treat him with patience, he'll settle down. Or we could shoot him before he cripples someone," the big man said. Caleb's jaw tightened. "We're not shooting him, Wade." So the big man was Wade. Evelyn filed that information away. "Now, what's this about someone looking for work?" Caleb's gaze swept the group and landed on Evelyn. She stepped forward, suddenly very aware of how she must look. Dusty, sweating, dressed in clothes that had seen better days. "I am. My name is Evelyn Mercer." Caleb studied her for a long moment. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "We don't hire women for ranch work, Miss Mercer. I'm not asking to work with cattle. I can cook, clean, mend clothes, keep house. We already have someone for that." Evelyn felt her last hope starting to slip away. "Please, I'm a hard worker. I don't complain. I can—" The answer is no. Just like that. No explanation, no apology, just a flat rejection. Evelyn's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She'd walked 6 hours to get here. She had $7 left and nowhere to go. And this man was dismissing her like she was nothing. "He's not vicious," she said suddenly. "The horse. You said he's been mistreated." Caleb's expression darkened. "Excuse me?" "Everyone else wanted to shoot him, but you saw that he was afraid, not violent. That takes—" She searched for the right word. "Understanding. Patience." "What's your point, Miss Mercer?" "My point is that sometimes the things people want to discard are worth saving." She held his gaze. "And sometimes the help you need doesn't look the way you expected." The ranch hands had gone quiet, watching this exchange with undisguised interest. Wade looked like he wanted to throw Evelyn off the property himself. Caleb's jaw worked for a moment. Then he said, "You ever work on a ranch before?" "No." "You know how to handle horses?" "No." "Can you haul water, scrub floors, work from sunup to sundown without complaining?" "Yes." "The pay is room and board plus $15 a month. You'll sleep in a room off the kitchen. You'll help with cooking, cleaning, laundry, and anything else that needs doing. The men can be crude and the work is hard, no special treatment. If you can't handle it, you leave, understood?" Evelyn's heart was pounding. "Understood. Then you start tomorrow morning. Wade will show you where you'll be staying." Caleb turned to walk away, then paused. "And Miss Mercer, that wedding dress in your trunk? Leave it packed. This isn't that kind of place." He strode toward the main house without waiting for a response. Wade glared at her. "Boss is making a mistake. But since he gave the order, come on, I'll show you to your room." Evelyn grabbed her trunk and followed him, trying to ignore the stares and whispered comments from the other ranch hands. Wade led her around the back of the main house to a small door that opened into the kitchen. The room beyond was enormous, easily 3 times the size of her family's kitchen back in Philadelphia. A massive iron stove dominated one wall, and shelves lined with supplies covered another. A long wooden table stood in the center, scarred and worn from years of use. "Through there," Wade said, pointing to a narrow door in the corner. "That's your room. Breakfast is at 5. You'll help Maria with cooking and cleaning. Do what she tells you and stay out of the way of the men. Clear?" "Crystal clear." Wade looked her up and down one more time, his expression cold. "You won't last a week." Then he left. Evelyn opened the door to her room and found a space barely large enough for a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a washstand. But it was clean, and it was hers. And most importantly, it was shelter. She sat down on the bed and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd arrived in Texas as a bride. She'd been rejected, humiliated, and left with nothing. And now she was starting over as a servant on a ranch run by a man whose eyes held more ghosts than warmth. But she had a job. She had a roof over her head. It was a start. Outside her tiny window, the sun was beginning to set over the endless Texas landscape, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Evelyn watched it for a moment, then unpacked her trunk and prepared for whatever came next. She didn't know it yet, but her arrival had already changed something at Crow Ranch. and there was no going back. Bashit. The next morning arrived with a knock on her door at 4:30. Up, a woman's voice called. We got 30 men to feed. Evelyn jerked awake, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She dressed quickly in her simplest work dress and emerged into the kitchen to find a stocky Mexican woman already working at the stove. You're the new girl? The woman didn't look up from the bacon she was frying. I'm Maria. You know how to make biscuits? Yes, ma'am. Don't call me ma'am. Makes me feel old. Maria pointed to a large bowl and a bag of flour. Make enough for 40. Some of these idiots eat like they got hollow legs. Evelyn tied on an apron and got to work. By 5 o'clock, the long table in the main dining hall was loaded with platters of bacon, scrambled eggs, biscuits, gravy, and coffee, so strong it could strip paint. The ranch hands filed in, most of them barely awake, and ate like they hadn't seen food in a week. Evelyn and Maria kept the platters full and the coffee flowing. The men mostly ignored them except to grunt for more food. A few stared at Evelyn with curiosity or suspicion, but no one spoke to her directly. Caleb ate alone at the end of the table, his attention focused on a ledger book. He didn't acknowledge Evelyn's presence even once. After breakfast, the real work began. Maria showed Evelyn how things worked at Crow Ranch. The men ate 3 full meals a day, which meant cooking started before dawn and didn't finish until after dark. Between meals, there was laundry to wash, floors to scrub, vegetables to prep, and 100 other tasks that never seemed to end. The boss, he runs this place like clockwork, Maria explained as they hauled water from the well. Everything has a schedule. Everything has a place. You mess up the routine, you'll hear about it. What's he like? Evelyn asked. Mr. Crow? Maria's expression grew cautious. Fair, demanding, pays better than anyone else in the territory, but she hesitated. But he's been different the last few years, cold, like something inside him died. Maria lowered her voice. His wife, Catherine, she passed about 4 years back, riding accident, threw from her horse and broke her neck. After that, the boss shut himself off from everyone. Now he just works and expects everyone else to do the same. Evelyn absorbed this information silently. It explained the hardness in Caleb's eyes, the way he moved through the world like he was carved from stone. The days that followed blurred together into an exhausting routine. Evelyn worked from before sunrise until well after dark, her hands raw from scrubbing and her back aching from hauling water. Maria was demanding but fair, and gradually Evelyn learned the rhythm of the ranch. The men continued to ignore her for the most part, though she occasionally caught them staring. Wade, the foreman, went out of his way to make things difficult, asking for meals at odd hours, complaining about imaginary problems, generally making sure she knew she wasn't welcome. Evelyn kept her head down and did her work. But every evening, after the dinner dishes were washed and put away, she found herself drawn to the corrals. The black stallion, someone had told her his name was Midnight, was kept in a separate pen away from the other horses. No one went near him if they could help it. The few times anyone tried to handle him, he became violent again, lashing out with hooves and teeth. Evelyn started standing outside his corral after dinner, just watching. At first, Midnight ignored her completely. Then he started watching her back, his ears flicking toward her whenever she arrived. She never tried to touch him or enter his space. She just stood there, sometimes talking quietly about nothing in particular. You remind me of how I feel, she told him one evening. Angry because everyone expects the worst from you, ready to fight because fighting is safer than trusting. Midnight snorted and tossed his head. I know, Evelyn said. It's easier to be vicious. People leave you alone that way. She didn't notice Caleb standing in the shadow of the barn, watching. 2 weeks into her employment, disaster struck during breakfast. One of the younger ranch hands, a cocky kid named Tommy, decided it would be funny to make a crude comment as Evelyn refilled his coffee. Tell me something, miss, he said loudly enough for the whole table to hear. You still got that wedding dress? Because I'm thinking maybe I could... He never finished the sentence. Caleb's hand slammed down on the table hard enough to rattle every plate. The entire room went silent. Finish that thought, Caleb said quietly, and you'll be looking for work in the next territory. Tommy went white. Boss, I was just... Get out! But out! Tommy scrambled away from the table and practically ran from the room. The other men suddenly found their food very interesting. Caleb stood, picked up his ledger, and left without another word. Evelyn stood frozen with the coffee pot in her hand, her cheeks burning. She'd been humiliated plenty of times since arriving in Texas, but having someone defend her, especially someone like Caleb Crow, left her completely off balance. Maria touched her arm. Keep moving. Don't let them see it got to you. Evelyn nodded and finished pouring coffee with hands that shook slightly. That evening, she went to the corrals as usual. Midnight was pacing along the fence line, agitated about something. His ears were pinned back and he was snorting with every breath. What's wrong? Evelyn asked softly. The horse stopped and looked at her. Then he walked over to the fence, the closest he'd ever come to her, and stood there, his massive head hanging over the top rail. Evelyn's breath caught. Slowly, carefully, she raised her hand and held it out palm down, exactly the way she'd seen Caleb do it. Midnight's nostrils flared. He stretched his neck forward, and then, finally, he touched his nose to her palm. Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes. This violent, angry, unwanted horse had just chosen to trust her. There you are, she whispered. I see you. He doesn't usually do that. Evelyn spun around. Caleb was standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable in the fading light. I'm sorry, she said quickly. I know I should be working. You've been coming out here every night. It wasn't a question. I hope that's all right. I finish all my work first, and I don't... Why? Evelyn looked back at Midnight. Because everyone's given up on him. They think he's dangerous and broken and not worth the effort. But he's not. He's just... She struggled to find the words. He's just been hurt too many times. So he hurts first, before anyone can hurt him again. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. That horse nearly killed 2 men before I bought him. Previous owner beat him bloody for being difficult. Most people would have shot him by now. But not you. No. Caleb stepped closer to the fence. Midnight tensed, but didn't retreat. Not me. They stood there side by side in the growing darkness, watching the horse who'd been broken and survived. You're different than I expected, Caleb said finally. Different how? Tougher. Most women would have quit by now. Wade's been making things as difficult as possible, and you haven't complained once. I've got nowhere else to go, Evelyn said honestly. Complaining won't change that. Is that the only reason you're still here? Because you have no choice? Evelyn considered the question. At first, yes, but now... She glanced at him. Now I think I'm staying because I want to see what happens next. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. Just for a second, so brief she might have imagined it. Then the walls came back up and he stepped away from the fence. Get some rest, Miss Mercer. Tomorrow's wash day. He walked back toward the house, leaving Evelyn alone with Midnight and the stars. But something had changed. She could feel it in the air between them, like a wire pulled taut. The following week brought the first real test. A massive storm system moved across the territory, bringing torrential rain and lightning that turned the sky into a war zone. The ranch hands worked frantically to secure the buildings and get the animals under cover, but the weather was moving too fast. Just after noon, someone shouted from the horse barn. Colts are loose! They broke through the fence! Evelyn was in the kitchen when she heard the commotion. She ran outside and saw chaos. 3 young horses stampeding in terror as lightning cracked overhead. The ranch hands were trying to corner them, but every time they got close, another lightning strike would send the colts bolting in a different direction. One of them, a bay filly with white stockings, was running straight toward the broken fence line. If she made it through, she'd be out in open territory with no way to get her back safely. Evelyn didn't think. She just ran. She cut across the muddy yard and reached the fence opening seconds before the filly. Without hesitation, she spread her arms wide and shouted, Hey! The filly skidded to a stop, eyes rolling white. Easy, Evelyn said, her voice somehow calm despite her racing heart. Easy now. You're all right. The filly trembled, ready to bolt again. Evelyn took a step forward, then another. Rain poured down her face, plastering her hair to her skull. Lightning split the sky, but she didn't flinch. Come here, sweetheart, come on. The filly's ears flicked toward her voice. Evelyn reached out slowly, and the filly stretched her neck forward and sniffed Evelyn's hand. That's a girl. That's a brave girl. Behind her, the ranch hands had gone completely silent, watching this unfold. Evelyn slipped her fingers under the filly's halter and held on gently. Let's get you inside where it's safe, okay? She led the trembling horse back toward the barn, moving carefully through the mud. The filly followed without resistance, trusting this human who'd chosen to stand between her and danger. When they reached the barn, several ranch hands moved forward to take the filly, but Caleb's voice stopped them. "Let her finish." Evelyn led the filly all the way into an empty stall, removed her halter, and latched the door. Only then did she allow herself to feel the full impact of what she'd just done. Her hands started shaking. Caleb appeared beside her, his expression dark with something that might have been anger or concern or both. That was incredibly stupid. She would have been lost if you could have been trampled. But I wasn't. This time, Caleb's jaw was tight. Next time you might not be so lucky. Leave the horse handling to people who know what they're doing. Evelyn turned to face him fully, rain still dripping from her hair. With all due respect, Mr. Crow, those people were about to lose 3 valuable horses. I did what needed to be done. You did something reckless. So did you when you climbed into that corral with Midnight. That stopped him. For a moment they just stared at each other, both soaked to the bone while rain hammered on the barn roof above them. "You're going to be a problem, aren't you?" Caleb said finally. "Probably." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. Then it was gone, replaced by the usual hardness. "Go dry off before you catch pneumonia. And Miss Mercer?" "Yes?" "Good work." He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing in the barn with her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the storm. Tmt. After that day, things shifted at Crow Ranch. The ranch hands started treating Evelyn with something approaching respect. They still didn't go out of their way to be friendly, but the open hostility faded. Even Wade seemed to back off slightly, though he still watched her with suspicion. But the biggest change was Caleb. He started finding excuses to be wherever Evelyn was working. If she was hanging laundry, he'd suddenly need to check the fence nearby. If she was in the garden, he'd remember something that needed fixing on the pump. He never stayed long and rarely spoke more than a few words, but his presence was constant. And every evening, when Evelyn went to visit Midnight, Caleb would appear shortly after. They fell into an unspoken routine, standing on opposite sides of the corral, watching the black stallion, occasionally exchanging a few words, but mostly just existing in comfortable silence. One evening, about a month after Evelyn's arrival, Caleb brought a saddle blanket to the corral. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked. "Testing something." He climbed over the fence, blanket in hand. Midnight tensed immediately, his posture shifting to defensive. But Caleb moved with that same patient stillness he'd shown the first day. He approached slowly, letting Midnight see the blanket, smell it, investigate it. When he finally laid it across the horse's back, Midnight flinched but didn't bolt. "You're going to try to ride him," Evelyn said. "Eventually, but not tonight." Caleb removed the blanket and stepped back. Tonight was just about trust. He climbed out of the corral and stood beside Evelyn again. "He trusts you," she observed. "He's learning to. There's a difference." Caleb glanced at her. "Same way he's learning to trust you." "I haven't done anything special. You show up every night. You don't ask anything from him. You just—" He struggled to find the word. "You just see him. Not the violence or the reputation. Just him." Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Is that so different from what you're doing?" "Maybe not." Caleb's voice had gone quiet. "But I'm paid to rehabilitate difficult horses. You're not. I'm not doing it for pay." "Then why?" Evelyn looked at Midnight, who was watching them both with those intelligent dark eyes. "Because someone should. Because he deserves to know that not everyone will hurt him. Because—" She took a breath. "Because I know what it's like to be unwanted." The words hung between them. Caleb was very still. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "You're not unwanted here." Evelyn's breath caught. She turned to look at him and found him already watching her with an intensity that made her pulse race. "Mr. Crow, Caleb." Caleb. His name felt strange in her mouth. Intimate. "I should get back inside. Maria will wonder—" "She knows where you are." He didn't move. "Everyone knows where you are. And what do they think about that? That I'm paying too much attention to the help?" His mouth quirked slightly. "Wade's convinced you're some kind of witch." Despite herself, Evelyn laughed. "A witch? You tamed the horse no one else could touch. You walked into a storm to save a filly. You survived Wade's attempts to drive you off. From his perspective, it's the only logical explanation." "And what's your perspective?" Caleb's expression grew serious. "My perspective is that you showed up here with nothing, asked for nothing, and somehow made yourself indispensable in less than 2 months. My perspective is that I don't know what the hell to do with that." Evelyn's heart was hammering now. "You don't have to do anything with it, don't I?" He took a step closer. "Because here's the problem, Evelyn. Every day I tell myself to keep my distance, to stay professional, to remember that you work for me and nothing more. And every day I fail a little more at that." "Caleb, you should go inside," he said abruptly, his walls slamming back into place. "It's getting late." He walked away quickly, leaving Evelyn standing alone by the corral with her thoughts in chaos. Behind her, midnight nickered softly, as if he understood exactly what had just happened. The next morning at breakfast, Caleb didn't look at her once. Evelyn told herself it didn't matter. That last night had been a momentary lapse for both of them. That the smart thing was to pretend it had never happened and maintain the professional distance that should have always existed between an employer and employee. But her traitorous heart had other ideas. She found herself watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice. The way he moved with unconscious confidence. The rare moments when he almost smiled at something one of the men said. The glimpses of the man beneath the armor. Someone who had once been capable of warmth before grief had frozen him solid. Maria noticed, of course. "Careful," she murmured one afternoon as they prepared dinner. "That's a dangerous path you're walking." "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." Maria chopped vegetables with practiced efficiency. "The boss, he's been alone a long time. And you're the first woman since Catherine who's gotten under his skin. But that doesn't mean it's safe." "I'm not trying to get under anyone's skin." "Maybe not. But it's happening anyway." Maria looked at her seriously. "Caleb Crow is a good man, but he's also a man who's convinced he doesn't deserve happiness anymore. You push too hard, he'll shut down completely. Or worse. What's worse? He'll push you away to protect himself, and Wade will make sure you have no choice but to leave." The warning settled cold in Evelyn's stomach. But that evening, despite everything, she still went to visit Midnight. And despite his obvious resolve to stay away, Caleb still showed up 15 minutes later. They didn't speak about what had happened the night before. Instead, Caleb worked with Midnight, building trust slowly and patiently, while Evelyn watched and occasionally offered observations that he actually listened to. It became their unspoken compromise. They could have this. These quiet evenings where they existed in the same space without demanding anything more from each other than presence. It should have been enough. But day by day, Evelyn could feel the tension building between them like a storm gathering strength on the horizon. And she knew, they both knew, that eventually something would have to break. The breaking point came 3 weeks later on a Tuesday morning that started like any other. Evelyn was in the garden behind the kitchen, pulling weeds from the vegetable beds while the early sun turned the dew into diamonds on the leaves. She'd been at Crow Ranch for nearly 3 months now, and the work had changed her. Her hands were calloused, her arms stronger, her skin darker from hours spent outdoors. The scared woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach felt like someone from another lifetime. She was reaching for a stubborn root when she heard the shouting from the direction of the stables. "Someone get the boss, now!" Evelyn dropped her tools and ran. A crowd had gathered outside Midnight's corral. She pushed through the ranch hands and stopped cold. The black stallion was down on his side in the dirt, his flanks heaving with rapid, shallow breaths. His eyes rolled white with pain, and his legs kicked spasmodically every few seconds. "What happened?" Caleb's voice cut through the noise as he strode up from the barn. "Don't know, boss," one of the hands said. "Found him like this 10 minutes ago. He's been down ever since." Caleb vaulted over the fence and approached the horse carefully. Midnight tried to lift his head but couldn't manage it. A low groan came from deep in his chest. "His stomach's twisted," Wade said from outside the fence. "I've seen it before. Once they go down like this, there's nothing you can do." Evelyn climbed over the fence before anyone could stop her and dropped to her knees beside Midnight's head. The horse's breathing was getting worse. Short, desperate gasps that sounded like they were being torn from his lungs. "Easy," she murmured, placing her hand on his neck. "I'm here. You're all right." But he wasn't all right. Even she could see that. Caleb was examining the horse's abdomen, his face grim. "It's a colic. Bad one. His gut's completely blocked. So shoot him and be done with it," Wade said. "No point letting him suffer." "We're not shooting him." "Boss, look at him. He's dying. Best thing you can do is end it quick." Caleb stood up, his jaw tight. For a long moment he just stared down at the suffering horse, and Evelyn saw something break in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. "Get me a rifle," he said quietly. "No." Evelyn's voice came out harder than she'd intended. Caleb looked at her. "Evelyn." "No," she repeated. "You're giving up, just like everyone always gives up on him. He's in pain. I won't let him. So help him." She stood up, facing Caleb across Midnight's body. "You helped him before. When everyone else wanted him dead, you saw something worth saving. What changed?" Caleb's expression went dark. "What changed is that he's suffering and there's nothing we can do about it." "There's always something you can do. You're just afraid." The words landed like a slap. The ranch hands went dead silent. "Afraid of what?" Caleb's voice was dangerously soft. "Of fighting for something you might lose anyway." Evelyn held his gaze. "Of caring about something and watching it die despite everything you do. Just like—" She stopped herself, but it was too late. They both knew what she'd been about to say, just like Catherine. Caleb's face went white, then red. "Get back to the house." "No. That's an order." "I don't care." Evelyn knelt back down beside Midnight and placed both hands on his neck. "I'm not leaving him. If you want to shoot him, you'll have to shoot through me first." For a terrible moment, she thought Caleb might actually drag her out of the corral himself. His hands clenched into fists and something violent flashed through his eyes. Then Wade spoke up. "Boss, just let her stay with the damn horse. When he dies, maybe she'll finally understand how things work out here." Caleb looked from Wade to Evelyn, then back to the suffering stallion. His jaw worked like he was chewing gravel. "Fine," he bit out. "You want to watch him die? Go ahead. But when it's over, we're going to have a long conversation about your place here." He climbed out of the corral and walked away, his shoulders rigid with anger. The ranch hands dispersed slowly, most of them shaking their heads. Only Wade lingered, leaning against the fence with his arms crossed. "You just made a real bad enemy," he said conversationally. "Boss doesn't like people throwing his dead wife in his face. I didn't. You did. And now you're going to sit here and watch that horse suffer until Caleb comes to his senses and puts a bullet in its brain." Wade smiled without warmth. "Hope it was worth it." He walked away, leaving Evelyn alone with Midnight. The horse groaned again, his breathing getting more labored by the minute. Evelyn stroked his neck and felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd made everything worse. She'd humiliated Caleb in front of his men, thrown his grief in his face. And for what? To prove some point about not giving up? To show that she was just as stubborn and self-destructive as everyone said? "I'm sorry," she whispered to Midnight. "I'm so sorry." But she didn't leave. Instead, she started talking to him the way she had every night for months, telling him about nothing and everything, keeping her voice calm, even though her heart was breaking. She told him about Philadelphia, about the family that had been so eager to get rid of her, about the wedding dress she'd worn like armor into a town that wanted nothing to do with her. "I know what it feels like," she said, "to be scared and angry and so tired of fighting, to want to just give up because it would be easier." Midnight's ear flicked toward her voice. "But you didn't give up. Even when everyone said you were too broken to save, you kept fighting. You let Caleb help you. You let me help you." Her voice cracked. "So don't you dare quit now." The sun climbed higher. An hour passed, then 2. Midnight's breathing grew worse. His body temperature was dropping. Evelyn could feel him slipping away beneath her hands. She'd failed. Wade was right. All she'd done was prolong the inevitable. Then Maria appeared at the fence carrying a bucket and some rags. "What are you doing?" Evelyn asked. "Helping." Maria climbed over the fence and set down her supplies. "You can't do this alone." "But Caleb said—" "Caleb's angry because you're right, and he knows it." Maria knelt down and started wetting the rags. "We need to keep the horse cool, and we need to try to get him to move. He can't stand. Then we roll him. Every 20 minutes we roll him from one side to the other. Sometimes that's enough to get the gut untwisted." They worked together through the brutal afternoon heat. Every 20 minutes they pushed and pulled until they managed to roll Midnight's massive body from one side to the other. It was exhausting, back-breaking work, and the horse fought them weakly each time, too far gone to understand they were trying to help. 2 hours became 3. 3 became 4. Evelyn's dress was soaked with sweat and covered in dirt. Her arms trembled from exertion. But she kept going. Around hour 5, one of the younger ranch hands, a kid named Pete, who'd always been decent to her, brought them water and food. Boss know you're helping? Evelyn asked Maria. Don't care if he does. Maria wiped her forehead. That man's been living in the past so long he can't see what's right in front of him anymore. Maybe you pushing back was what he needed. Or maybe I just made everything worse. Maybe, but at least you're fighting for something. Maria looked at her seriously. Most people don't even do that much. They rolled midnight again. This time, something happened. The horse's breathing hitched, stuttered, then evened out slightly. His legs stopped their spasmodic kicking. Did that? Evelyn started. Shh. Maria pressed her ear to Midnight's belly and listened. After a moment, a slow smile spread across her face. I hear gut sounds. The blockage might be moving. Hope flared in Evelyn's chest, bright and painful. Another hour passed. Midnight's breathing continued to improve. His eyes looked less panicked, more focused. And then, as the sun began to sink toward the horizon, the stallion lifted his head. Evelyn's breath caught. Oh my! Midnight struggled for a moment, his legs scrambling for purchase. Then, with a massive effort, he rolled onto his chest. Easy, Evelyn said, hardly daring to believe it. Take your time. The horse rested for a few minutes, gathering strength. Then he surged upward and stood on shaking legs. Maria laughed out loud. I'll be damned. Midnight stood there swaying slightly, but he was up. He was breathing normally. He was alive. Evelyn stood on legs that barely supported her weight and approached the horse slowly. Midnight turned his head toward her and pressed his nose against her shoulder, the closest thing to a thank you a horse could give. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks. You're all right. You're going to be all right. Evelyn. She turned to find Caleb standing outside the fence. She had no idea how long he'd been there. His face was unreadable, but his eyes held something she couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe. Or respect. Or something more complicated than either. He's going to make it, she said, her voice rough from hours of talking to the horse. Caleb climbed over the fence and walked to Midnight. The horse tensed slightly, but allowed Caleb to run his hands over his neck and flanks, checking for injury. 6 hours, Caleb said finally. You fought for him for 6 hours. 7, actually. Evelyn wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Maria helped. I saw. He looked at her then, really looked at her, taking in her filthy dress, her sunburned face, the exhaustion radiating from every line of her body. You were right. What you said this morning. I was afraid. I shouldn't have. Yes, you should have. He moved closer. Someone needed to. I've spent 4 years being afraid to care about anything because caring means you can lose it. And when Catherine died, He stopped, swallowed hard. I couldn't go through that again. So I stopped trying. Caleb, let me finish. His voice was rough. You came here with nothing. No home, no money, no reason to believe anything would work out. And instead of getting bitter or angry or giving up, you just kept fighting. For a job nobody wanted to give you. For a horse everyone said was too dangerous. For a place in a world that made it clear you weren't welcome. He was standing very close now. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. You shamed me today, he continued, in front of my men. You threw my dead wife in my face and told me I was a coward. Evelyn's throat tightened. I'm sorry. Don't be, because you were right. He reached out and wiped a smudge of dirt from her cheek with his thumb. I am a coward. I've been hiding behind work and discipline and distance because it was easier than feeling anything real. But then you showed up and made that impossible. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. What are you saying? She whispered. I'm saying that He stopped himself, jaw tightening. I need to think about a lot of things. But Evelyn, what you did today, that took more courage than I've shown in 4 years. He stepped back abruptly, like he'd gotten too close to something dangerous. Get cleaned up and get some rest. Maria will bring you dinner. He looked at Midnight one more time. And thank you for saving him. Then he was gone, walking back toward the house with that same rigid control he always wore like armor. Maria appeared at Evelyn's elbow. That man is so in love with you he can barely see straight. He didn't have to. Maria smiled. But he's also terrified. And when Caleb Crow is terrified, he gets mean, so be careful. Evelyn nodded numbly and let Maria lead her back to the kitchen. She was too exhausted to think clearly, too wrung out emotionally to process what had just happened. But that night, Lying in her narrow bed with every muscle screaming, she replayed Caleb's words over and over in her mind. Made that impossible. What did that mean? What had she made impossible? And why did the answer feel like standing at the edge of a cliff with no idea what waited below? The next morning, everything felt different. Caleb was waiting in the kitchen when Evelyn emerged at 4:30. He didn't speak, just handed her a cup of coffee and gestured for her to follow him outside. They walked to Midnight's corral in the pre-dawn darkness. The stallion was standing calmly, munching hay from a feeder. When he saw them approach, he walked over to the fence and nickered softly. "He's really all right," Evelyn said, relief washing through her again. "Thanks to you." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "I want to try something." "What?" "Get in the corral." Evelyn's eyes widened. "You're going to ride him?" "We're going to ride him, together." Her breath caught. "Caleb, I don't know how to—" "I'll teach you. Trust me." The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Evelyn climbed over the fence. Caleb followed with a saddle blanket and a simple hackamore. No bit, just a rope looped around Midnight's nose for gentle guidance. The horse watched them approach, but didn't retreat. Caleb moved with that same patient confidence, letting Midnight investigate the tack, smell everything, take his time accepting it. When he finally placed the saddle blanket on Midnight's back, the horse tensed but held still. "Good boy," Caleb murmured. Then he turned to Evelyn. "Come here." She moved to stand beside him. This close, she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the dark stubble on his jaw, could smell leather and soap, and something uniquely him. "I'm going to lift you up," he said. "You're going to sit on his back with just the blanket. No saddle yet. Just you and him. Can you do that?" Evelyn's heart was racing. "Yes." Caleb placed his hands on her waist, strong, warm, steady. "Ready?" She nodded. He lifted her easily, and suddenly she was sitting on Midnight's broad back with nothing but a blanket between them. The horse shifted beneath her, muscles rippling, but he didn't bolt or buck. "How does it feel?" Caleb asked, one hand still steadying her leg. "Terrifying," Evelyn admitted. "Amazing." Caleb smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd known him. It transformed his entire face, made him look years younger, and Evelyn felt something crack open inside her chest. "Now I'm going to get up behind you," he said. "Hold on to his mane if you need to." Before she could protest, he'd swung up behind her, settling onto Midnight's back so that Evelyn was cradled between his thighs, his chest pressed against her back, his arms coming around her to hold the rope. "Oh," she breathed. "Still all right?" His voice was low, right next to her ear. She couldn't speak, could only nod. Caleb made a soft clicking sound and Midnight started walking. Slowly, carefully, they circled the corral, the horse who'd been too broken to save, the man who'd stopped believing in anything, and the woman who'd refused to give up on either of them. "You know what this means, don't you?" Caleb said quietly. "What?" "Midnight trusts you more than he trusts me. I've been working with him for months, but you're the one he chose." "That's not—" "It is." His arms tightened slightly around her. "Animals know things we try to hide from ourselves. They know who's safe, who's genuine, who won't hurt them, even when it would be easier to walk away." Evelyn's throat felt tight. "Caleb, I'm trying to say thank you for yesterday, for every day since you got here, for showing me that maybe—" He paused. "Maybe I don't have to be afraid anymore." She turned her head slightly to look at him. His face was inches from hers, his eyes dark and intense and full of things he wasn't saying. "I'm afraid too," she whispered. "All the time." "Of what?" "Of caring about this place, about these people, about—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "About me?" Her silence was answer enough. Caleb brought Midnight to a stop. For a long moment they just sat there, pressed together on the horse's back, not moving. Then Caleb said, "I can't promise you anything. I'm not good at this. I've spent so long being alone that I don't know how to be any other way. But Evelyn, if you're willing to be patient with me the way you've been patient with him," he gestured at Midnight, "maybe we could figure it out together." Before she could respond, voices erupted from the direction of the barn. "Boss, we got trouble!" Caleb cursed under his breath and slid off Midnight's back, then helped Evelyn down. They hurried toward the commotion and found Wade surrounded by several ranch hands, all of them looking agitated. "What's going on?" Caleb demanded. "Fence is down on the south pasture," Wade said. Looks like someone cut it deliberate. We're missing at least 20 head of cattle. Caleb's expression went hard. Rustlers? That'd be my guess. We need to ride out there now before the trail goes cold. Get the men together. I want... Already done, boss. We're ready to go. Wade's eyes slid to Evelyn with something that might have been satisfaction. Might be gone a few days, tracking them down. Caleb looked torn. Evelyn could see him trying to decide between duty and whatever had been building between them moments ago. Go, she said quietly. Do what you need to do. He studied her face for a moment, then nodded. When I get back, we'll talk. I'll be here. Something in his expression softened. Then he turned to Wade and started barking orders. Within 20 minutes, a group of 10 men were mounted and riding south, Caleb at their head. Evelyn watched them disappear into the distance and tried to ignore the cold feeling settling in her stomach. Maria came to stand beside her. Wade looked too pleased about that fence being cut. You think he had something to do with it? I think Wade doesn't like the way the boss looks at you, and I think he'd do just about anything to drive a wedge between you two. Maria touched her arm. Be careful while they're gone. Don't trust him. Evelyn nodded, but her attention was still on the empty horizon where Caleb had disappeared. The next 3 days dragged by like weeks. Evelyn threw herself into work, trying not to think about what Caleb had said, or what it might mean, or what would happen when he got back. She helped Maria with cooking and cleaning, tended the garden, and spent hours with Midnight, who was recovering beautifully. But something felt wrong. Wade had stayed behind to manage the ranch, and he watched Evelyn constantly with an expression she couldn't read. Several times she caught him talking quietly with some of the hands, conversations that stopped the moment she appeared. On the third night, she woke to the sound of horses outside. She dressed quickly and ran out to find Caleb and the others returning, all of them looking exhausted and empty-handed. No luck? She asked as Caleb dismounted. Trail went cold about 30 miles south. Whoever took them knew what they were doing. He looked at her, and even in the darkness she could see the frustration in his eyes. We'll try again tomorrow. You should rest first. Can't afford to. Every day we wait, they get further away. He started to walk toward the house, then paused. How's Midnight? Good. Better every day. And you? The question caught her off guard. I'm fine. Caleb looked like he wanted to say more, but Wade appeared out of the darkness. Boss, we need to talk about security. If rustlers are hitting us, we need more men on night watch. Fine. Set it up. Caleb glanced at Evelyn one more time, then followed Wade toward the bunkhouse. Evelyn stood alone in the yard, feeling like something important had just slipped through her fingers. The next week fell into a tense routine. Caleb and various groups of ranch hands rode out every day searching for the stolen cattle or any sign of the rustlers. They found nothing. Meanwhile, Wade's influence on the ranch grew stronger. He started making decisions without consulting Caleb, reassigning work duties, changing schedules. And his treatment of Evelyn shifted from suspicion to something uglier. Boss is wasting his time with those cattle, he said one morning as she served breakfast, and wasting his attention on other things too. Evelyn ignored him and kept working. You know what folks in town are saying? Wade continued, loud enough for everyone to hear. They're saying Caleb Crow's gone soft, that he's letting some desperate mail-order bride twist him around her finger. Several of the men laughed. Evelyn's cheeks burned, but she didn't respond. That true? Wade asked. You trying to work your way into the boss's good graces? Maybe get him to marry you so you can get your hands on this ranch. That's enough, Maria snapped from the kitchen. Just asking questions. Wade leaned back in his chair. Strange how all these problems started right after she showed up. Missing cattle, fences cut, almost like someone's trying to distract the boss. Evelyn set down the coffee pot carefully. Are you accusing me of something? Just making observations. Then observe this. I've worked harder in 3 months than you probably have in 3 years. And if you have a problem with me, take it up with Mr. Crow instead of running your mouth when he's not here. Wade's face darkened. You got a smart mouth for someone who's one step away from being thrown out on the street. And you've got a lot of opinions for someone who works for a man who clearly doesn't trust your judgment. The room went dead silent. Wade stood up slowly. He was massive, at least a foot taller than Evelyn and twice as wide. You want to repeat that? I think you heard me just fine. For a terrible moment, Evelyn thought he might actually hit her, but then Pete, the young ranch hand, stepped forward. Wade, boss said we're riding out at 6. We should get ready. Wade stared at Evelyn for another long moment, then shoved back from the table and stormed out. Several of the other men followed, though a few stayed behind. "That was stupid," one of them said, a grizzled older cowboy named Sam. "Wade's got a mean streak. You just made yourself a real enemy." "I'm not afraid of him." "Maybe you should be." But Sam's expression held something like respect. "You got guts, though. I'll give you that." After breakfast, Maria pulled Evelyn aside. "You need to tell Caleb what Wade's been saying. It's just talk. It's poison. He's turning the men against you, making them think you're some kind of schemer." Maria looked genuinely worried. "This is only going to get worse." But Caleb was gone for 2 more days, and when he finally returned, he looked so exhausted and frustrated that Evelyn couldn't bring herself to add to his burdens. The cattle were still missing, the rustlers had vanished, and the ranch was hemorrhaging money they couldn't afford to lose. That evening, she went to visit Midnight as usual. The stallion was doing so well that she'd started working with him herself, teaching him to accept a saddle, to respond to gentle pressure, to trust that not all humans would hurt him. She was brushing his coat when Caleb appeared. "You're getting good with him," he observed. "He makes it easy. He wants to trust someone." Caleb climbed into the corral and ran his hand along Midnight's neck. "I've been thinking about what I said before I left." Evelyn's heart kicked into a faster rhythm. And I meant it, all of it." He turned to face her. "But I need you to understand something. This ranch is my entire life. It's all I have left of Catherine, of the person I used to be before she died. If I let you in, if I let myself care about you, I'm risking everything." "I know. Do you?" "Because I'm not talking about some casual thing. I'm talking about," he struggled for the words, "about changing everything. About admitting that maybe I want something more than just work and discipline and being alone." Evelyn set down the brush with shaking hands. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me you feel the same way, or tell me you don't. Just tell me something real." She looked at this hard, damaged, complicated man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, who worked with broken horses because he understood what it felt like to be broken, who was so terrified of losing someone again that he'd rather feel nothing at all. "I feel the same way," she said quietly. "I have for weeks, maybe months, and it scares me just as much as it scares you." Caleb closed the distance between them in 2 strides. He cupped her face in his calloused hands and looked at her like she was something precious and fragile and completely unexpected. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Neither do I." "What if I mess it up? What if we both do?" She covered his hands with hers. "What if we just try anyway?" He kissed her then, hesitant at first, like he'd forgotten how, then deeper as weeks of suppressed feeling finally broke free. Evelyn pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered, "not as an employee. Stay because you want to. Because you—" He couldn't finish. "Because I love you?" The words came out before she could stop them. Caleb went very still. Then he pulled back just enough to see her face. "Do you?" Evelyn's throat was tight, but she forced herself to be honest. "Yes. I think I have since that first day when you climbed into this corral with a horse everyone else wanted dead. When you chose to see something worth saving instead of something broken." Something fierce and bright flashed through his eyes. "Evelyn, you don't have to say it back. I know you're not—" He kissed her again, cutting off her words. This time there was nothing hesitant about it. It was claiming and desperate and full of 4 years of loneliness finally finding an end. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. "I'm not good with words, but I can show you, if you'll let me." "Show me what?" "That you're not unwanted, that you never were, that this place—" He gestured at the ranch around them. "It's better with you in it. I'm better with you in it." Tears blurred Evelyn's vision. "Caleb!" A shout from the direction of the barn interrupted them. "Fire! The hay barn's on fire!" They broke apart and ran. Orange flames were already licking up the side of the largest hay storage building, and men were scrambling with buckets and blankets. "Get the horses out of the stable," Caleb shouted. "If those flames spread—" Everyone moved at once. The next hour was chaos, hauling water, beating out flames, moving terrified animals to safety. By the time they got the fire under control, The hay barn was destroyed, and two others were badly damaged. Caleb stood surveying the wreckage, his face like carved stone. Wade appeared at his shoulder. Might have been an accident, Wade said, or might have been whoever's been causing all the other problems. What other problems? Cut fences? Missing cattle? And now this. Wade's eyes slid to where Evelyn stood covered in soot and ash. All these troubles started right around the time she showed up. Makes a man wonder. Caleb's expression went dangerous. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe you should ask yourself who benefits from this ranch being in chaos, who's been getting real close to the boss while everything falls apart around him. You think Evelyn had something to do with this? I think it's mighty convenient timing. Caleb looked from Wade to Evelyn, and something cold settled in his expression. The warmth from moments ago was completely gone, replaced by suspicion and doubt, and Evelyn felt her heart crack right down the middle. You can't be serious, Evelyn said, her voice barely above a whisper. But Caleb's face told her everything she needed to know. The doubt was there, written in the tight set of his jaw, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers. He was actually considering it. I need to investigate all possibilities, he said, and the professional coldness in his tone cut deeper than any accusation could have. All possibilities? Evelyn's hands clenched into fists. You just said, I know what I said. His voice was flat, but Wade's right about the timing. The timing? She laughed, a sharp sound with no humor in it. 3 months ago you hired me. 3 months ago someone started sabotaging your ranch. Therefore I must be responsible? That's your logic? Wade crossed his arms, watching this exchange with barely concealed satisfaction. Just saying it's worth looking into, boss. Get out, Evelyn said to Wade, her voice shaking with rage. Excuse me? I said get out. This is between me and Caleb. Wade looked at Caleb, who gave a short nod. The foreman walked away slowly, but Evelyn could feel his presence lingering just out of sight, probably listening to every word. She turned back to Caleb. You think I'm sabotaging the ranch? The place that gave me the only home I've had since I left Philadelphia. The place where I've worked myself half to death every single day for months. You think I'm destroying it? I think I need to be sure. About what? About me? About whether the woman you just kissed is actually some kind of criminal mastermind? Her voice rose. I saved Midnight when everyone wanted him dead. I've never complained, never caused problems, never done anything except try to be useful, and you're going to stand there and— My wife died on this ranch, Caleb cut her off, his voice hard. 4 years ago I watched her get thrown from a horse and break her neck 20 feet from where we're standing. So yes, I'm going to be careful about who I trust. Yes, I'm going to ask questions when things don't add up, because I've already lost everything once, and I won't let it happen again. The words hung between them like a wall. Evelyn felt something break inside her chest. I'm not Catherine. I know that. Do you? Because it seems like you're so busy protecting yourself from losing someone again that you can't see what's actually happening right in front of you. She gestured at the burned barn. Someone is trying to destroy this ranch. Someone is trying to hurt you. But it's not me. Then who? I don't know. But maybe if you spent less time suspecting everyone who gets close to you and more time actually looking, you'd figure it out. Caleb's jaw tightened. Go back to the house. Is that an order? Yes. And if I refuse? Then you can pack your things and leave. Tonight. The words came out cold, final. Evelyn stared at him. At this man she'd kissed minutes ago. This man who'd held her face like she was something precious and told her the ranch was better with her in it. That man was gone. In his place stood the same hard, closed-off rancher who'd tried to send her away her first day here. Fine, she said quietly. I'll go back to the house. I'll stay out of your way. But Caleb, when you figure out who's really behind this, don't expect me to forgive you for this. She turned and walked away before he could see the tears starting to fall. Maria was waiting in the kitchen, her face tight with worry. I heard shouting. Wade's convinced Caleb I'm sabotaging the ranch. Evelyn's voice cracked. And Caleb believed him. That fool. Maria pulled her into a quick, fierce hug. The boss is scared. When he's scared, he gets stupid. He told me to pack my things. He didn't mean it. Didn't he? Evelyn pulled back and wiped her eyes roughly. Maybe this is for the best. Maybe I was stupid to think someone like him could actually—
She couldn't finish. Love you? Maria said gently. Oh, mija, he does. Anyone with eyes can see it. That's exactly why he's pushing you away. Then he's a coward.
Yes, but cowards can learn to be brave if you give them the chance. Evelyn wanted to believe that, but the look in Caleb's eyes when he'd questioned her, the coldness in his voice, those weren't things you could just forgive and forget. She went to her small room and sat on the bed, staring at her battered trunk in the corner. The wedding dress was still in there, folded carefully at the bottom. A reminder of the woman who'd arrived here desperate and hopeful and naive enough to think things could work out. A knock on her door made her jump. "It's Pete," a young voice called. "Can I talk to you?" Evelyn opened the door to find the ranch hand shifting nervously from foot to foot. "What is it?" "I just wanted to say, I don't believe Wade, about you being behind the problems." Pete looked at his boots. "You've been nothing but decent to everyone here, and the way you saved Midnight, that wasn't someone who wants to hurt this place." Something in Evelyn's chest loosened slightly. "Thank you." "Most of the guys feel the same way. Wade's been stirring up trouble, but we're not all buying it." He hesitated. "Just thought you should know you've got friends here, in case things get worse." After he left, Evelyn lay down on her narrow bed and stared at the ceiling. Sleep felt impossible, but eventually exhaustion dragged her under. She woke to the sound of horses and shouting. The sky outside her window was still dark, maybe 3 or 4 in the morning. She dressed quickly and ran outside to find another crisis unfolding. The cattle in the south pasture were gone, all of them. Over 100 head of prime beef vanished in the night. Caleb stood in the middle of the chaos, his face like granite. Wade was beside him, already organizing search parties. "Could have been more rustlers," one of the hands was saying. "Could have hit us while we were dealing with the fire." "Or could have been an inside job," Wade said, his eyes finding Evelyn in the crowd. "Someone who knew we'd all be distracted." Several of the men turned to look at her. Their expressions ranged from suspicious to uncertain to openly hostile. "I was asleep," Evelyn said clearly, "in my room. Maria can confirm—" "Maria's your friend," Wade interrupted. "Of course she'd cover for you." "This is insane," Pete spoke up. "You really think she snuck out and herded 100 cattle away by herself, in the middle of the night, without anyone hearing?" "Maybe she had help," Wade suggested. "Maybe this whole thing has been planned from the start. Mail-order bride shows up out of nowhere, gets close to the boss, starts causing problems." "Enough!" Caleb's voice cut through the argument. He looked directly at Evelyn. "Where were you tonight, exactly?" "In my room. I went to bed around 9 and didn't leave until I heard the shouting just now." "Anyone see you, besides Maria?" The implication was clear. He still didn't trust her. "No," Evelyn said, her voice hollow. "I was alone." Caleb's expression didn't change. "Then you'll stay in the house until we sort this out. No going to the corrals, no working outside. Understood?" It was prison. He was making her a prisoner in her own home. "Yes, sir," she said, putting as much ice into the words as she could manage. She turned and walked back to the house with her spine straight and her head high, refusing to let anyone see how much this was destroying her. The next 3 days were torture. Evelyn stayed in the house as ordered, helping Maria with cooking, but otherwise keeping to her small room. The ranch hands barely spoke to her. Those who did treated her like she was already convicted. And Caleb avoided her completely. She watched from the kitchen window as he organized search parties, as he rode out every day looking for the stolen cattle, as he grew more haggard and exhausted with each passing hour. Part of her wanted to go to him, to help somehow, but the larger part was still furious at his lack of trust. "He's tearing himself apart," Maria observed, following Evelyn's gaze. "Losing the ranch piece by piece and losing you at the same time. He made his choice. Did he? Or did Wade make it for him?" Evelyn turned away from the window. "It doesn't matter. He chose to believe Wade instead of me. That's all I need to know." But that night, unable to sleep, she found herself at the kitchen window again, and she saw something that made her blood run cold. Wade was standing in the shadows near the equipment barn, talking to 2 men she didn't recognize. Even from a distance, she could see money changing hands. Then Wade pointed toward the south pasture, and the men nodded before disappearing into the darkness. Evelyn's heart hammered. She needed proof. She needed someone to witness this besides her. She slipped out the back door, staying in the shadows, and crept closer to where Wade was standing. He was counting money now, a satisfied smile on his face. "Boss is about ready to crack," he said to someone she couldn't see. Few more hits and he'll have to sell. Then we can buy the place for nothing. What about the girl? Another voice asked. She'll be long gone by then. Already got Caleb half convinced she's behind everything. Stupid bastard's so scared of losing someone again, he can't see straight. Wade laughed. Man's his own worst enemy. Evelyn backed away slowly, her mind racing. She needed to tell Caleb. She needed to. Her foot caught on something and she stumbled, knocking over a metal bucket. The crash echoed across the yard like a gunshot. Wade's head snapped around. Who's there? Evelyn ran. She made it maybe 20 feet before Wade caught her, his massive hand closing around her arm and yanking her backward. Well, well, he said. Out for a midnight walk? Let go of me. Not until we have a talk about what you just heard. His grip tightened painfully. You've been a problem from the start. Should have run you off the first day. Caleb will believe whatever I tell him. I've worked for him for 8 years. You've been here 3 months. Who do you think he'll trust? Wade started dragging her toward the barn. Evelyn fought, but he was twice her size and strong as an ox. Help! She screamed. Someone help! Wade clamped his hand over her mouth. Shut up. You're going to disappear tonight, and everyone will think you ran away. Guilty conscience and all that. Terror shot through her. He was going to kill her. She bit down hard on his palm. Wade roared and loosened his grip just enough for her to wrench free. She ran toward the house, screaming for help at the top of her lungs. Lights started coming on in the bunkhouse. Men stumbled outside, confused and half-dressed. And then Caleb was there, grabbing Wade by the shirt and slamming him against the barn wall. What the hell is going on? He attacked me, Wade gasped. I was checking on the horses, and she came out of nowhere. He's lying. Evelyn's voice was shaking. I saw him. He was meeting with men, taking money. He's the one behind everything. The rustling, the fire, all of it. Caleb looked from Wade to Evelyn, his expression unreadable. She's crazy, Wade said, making up stories because you're about to fire her. I heard him, Evelyn insisted. He was talking about buying the ranch after you're forced to sell. He's been sabotaging everything from the start. That's insane, Wade protested. Boss, you know me. 8 years I've worked for you. You really going to believe some desperate woman over me? Caleb was silent for a long moment. Evelyn could see the war playing out behind his eyes. 8 years of loyalty versus 3 months of something he didn't want to name. Let him go, Caleb said finally. Evelyn's heart sank. But then Caleb added, Pete, Sam, take Wade to the bunkhouse and make sure he stays there. I want 2 men watching him at all times. Wade's face went purple. You can't be serious. I'm dead serious. If what Evelyn says is true, you're finished. If it's not... Caleb's jaw tightened. We'll sort it out in the morning. Pete and Sam moved forward to grab Wade. The big foreman struggled, but even he couldn't fight off 2 men. You're making a mistake, boss, Wade shouted as they dragged him away. That woman is poison. She's been playing you from the start. Caleb waited until Wade was out of sight, then turned to Evelyn. Tell me everything. From the beginning. So she did. Every detail of what she'd seen and heard, stumbling over words in her urgency to make him understand. When she finished, Caleb was quiet for a long time. You should have come to me immediately, he said finally. Would you have believed me? You've barely looked at me for 3 days? He flinched. That's fair. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, you threw away everything we had the moment Wade planted a seed of doubt. Evelyn's voice cracked. You told me the ranch was better with me in it. You kissed me like you meant it, and then you believed I could hurt you the first chance you got. I was scared. So was I. I'm still scared. But I didn't let that turn me into someone who abandons people when things get hard. She wrapped her arms around herself. You said you didn't know how to do this. Well, neither do I. But I was willing to try. I was willing to be patient while you figured it out. And you repaid that by... She couldn't finish. The tears she'd been holding back for days finally broke free. Caleb moved toward her, then stopped like he didn't know if he was allowed to touch her anymore. Evelyn, don't. Just don't. She wiped her eyes roughly. Figure out if Wade's telling the truth. Fire him or arrest him or whatever you need to do. But leave me out of it. I can't leave you out of it. You're... What? What am I, Caleb? He looked at her with an expression so raw it hurt to witness. You're everything I didn't know I needed. And that terrifies me more than losing this ranch. More than anything Wade could do. Because ranches can be rebuilt.
But if I lose you because I was too much of a coward to trust what we have, then you'll have no one to blame but yourself, Evelyn finished quietly. They stood there in the darkness, the space between them feeling like miles instead of feet. I'm sorry, Caleb said. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I'm sorry. For doubting you, for listening to Wade, for being exactly the coward you accuse me of being. Sorry isn't enough. I know. So tell me what would be enough. Tell me how to fix this. Evelyn shook her head. I don't know if you can. Trust isn't something you can just apologize for breaking. It's... She struggled for the words. It's the foundation of everything, and you shattered it the moment you chose to believe I could hurt you. Then let me earn it back. How? I don't know yet, but Evelyn, I'm asking you not to give up on me. Not yet. His voice was rough. Please. She wanted to say no, wanted to protect herself the way he'd failed to protect her. But looking at him, at this damaged, difficult man who'd given her a chance when no one else would, she couldn't quite manage it. I'm not making any promises, she said finally, but I won't leave. Not until we sort out what Wade's been doing. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Caleb nodded, relief flickering across his face. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. He left to organize a search of Wade's belongings, leaving Evelyn standing alone in the yard with her heart in pieces. Maria found her there 20 minutes later and pulled her into the kitchen without a word. She made tea, pressed a cup into Evelyn's hands, and sat down across from her. You love him, Maria said. Not a question. I'm trying not to. Too late for that. Maria's smile was sad. The question is whether he's brave enough to love you back, or if he's going to let fear win. He chose fear once already, but he chose to protect you tonight. Even if he's not sure who to believe, he made sure you were safe. That counts for something. Did it? Evelyn wasn't sure anymore. She was still awake when Caleb returned an hour later. She heard him in the main house, his boots heavy on the wooden floors. Then a knock on her door. It's me, he said quietly. Can we talk? Evelyn opened the door. Caleb looked exhausted, his face drawn and his eyes dark with something that might have been shame. We found Wade's records, he said without preamble. Letters from cattle buyers in Mexico. Receipts showing he'd been selling our stock for months and pocketing the money. And a deed of sale already drawn up for the ranch, just waiting for me to go bankrupt and be forced to sell. Evelyn's breath caught. So it was him, all of it. All of it. The rustling, the fire, probably the fence cutting too. He's been bleeding this ranch dry and making sure you got blamed for it. Caleb's jaw tightened. He's in the root cellar now. I sent someone to Black Hollow for the sheriff. I'm sorry, Evelyn said. You're sorry? Evelyn, you were right about everything, and I... He stopped himself, looking away. I almost let him destroy both of us because I was too damn scared to trust you. You were protecting yourself. I was being a coward. There's a difference. He looked at her again. You saved Midnight when I wanted to give up on him. You saved this ranch tonight by being brave enough to investigate what you saw. You've saved me more times than I can count, and I repaid all of that by doubting you the first chance I got. Caleb, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I don't deserve that. But I am asking you to stay. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because... He took a breath. Because I need you here. This ranch needs you. I need you. And if you'll give me another chance, I swear I will spend every day proving that you can trust me not to run scared again. Evelyn looked at this man who'd been so broken by loss that he'd convinced himself being alone was safer than risking his heart. Who'd hired her when he didn't want to. Who'd worked beside her with horses. Who'd kissed her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. I can't go through that again, she said quietly. The doubt, the suspicion, the feeling like I'm one mistake away from being thrown out. I won't live like that. You shouldn't have to, and I promise... He stopped himself. No, promises are just words. Let me show you instead. Show me what? That I choose you. Not out of fear or desperation or loneliness, but because you're the strongest, bravest person I've ever met. Because you make this place feel like home again. Because when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want something more than just surviving. Evelyn's throat was tight. That's a lot to live up to. You already do, every single day. Caleb took a step closer. I love you, Evelyn. I should have said it before. Should have said it that night in the corral, or a dozen other times when I felt it so strongly it nearly knocked me over. But I was afraid if I said it out loud, I'd lose you the way I lost Catherine. Turns out the only way to lose you was by not saying it at all. The words she'd been waiting to hear, needed to hear, finally spoken. "You're an idiot," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know. And a coward. I know that too. And if you ever doubt me like that again, I will leave. I don't care how much I love you. I won't stay somewhere I'm not trusted." Caleb's expression shifted. "You love me." "Of course I love you, you impossible man. Why else would I still be here after everything?" He closed the remaining distance and pulled her into his arms. Evelyn buried her face in his chest and let herself cry, for the fear, the hurt, the relief, all of it. "I'm sorry," Caleb murmured against her hair. "I'm so sorry." "I know. I'm still angry at you." "You should be. And I'm not ready to just forget what happened. I don't expect you to. But I'm not leaving either. Not yet." Caleb pulled back just enough to look at her. "Not yet. That's all I can promise right now. We'll see what happens next." He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary she was setting. "Then I'll take not yet, and I'll work every day to turn it into something more." Before she could respond, shouting erupted from outside. They ran out to find the root cellar door hanging open and Wade gone. "He broke through the lock," Pete said, holding up pieces of twisted metal. "Must have had tools hidden somewhere. He's been gone maybe 10 minutes. Caleb cursed. "Get horses, now. If he makes it to Mexico with the money he's stolen, I'll find him." Evelyn was already moving toward the stables. "No, it's too dangerous." She turned to face him. "Midnight knows this land better than any horse you have, and he trusts me. We can cover ground faster than—" I said no, and I'm going anyway. She held his gaze. "You can either trust me to do this, or you can prove that everything you just said was a lie. Your choice." Caleb looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her expression stopped him. Finally, he nodded. "Take Pete with you. Stay together. And Evelyn?" He caught her hand. "Come back safe." "I will." She ran to the corral where Midnight was already sensing the urgency. His ears pricked forward and his muscles tense. She'd been working with him for weeks now, and tonight she was going to find out if all that trust had been real. "Easy boy," she murmured, slipping a bridle over his head. No time for a saddle, she'd have to ride bareback. "We've got work to do." Midnight stood perfectly still as she climbed onto his back. Pete appeared on another horse, and together they took off into the darkness. The black stallion moved like liquid lightning beneath her, responding to the slightest pressure of her legs or shift of her weight. They raced across the open rangeland with the wind tearing at Evelyn's hair and the stars wheeling overhead. She'd learned the ranch's layout over the past months, where the ravines cut through, where the old trails led, where someone running could hide. And she had an advantage Wade didn't know about. Midnight could see in the dark better than any horse she'd ever known. They rode for maybe 20 minutes before Midnight's ears swiveled forward and he slowed, snorting. "There," Pete said quietly, pointing. A figure on horseback was visible maybe a quarter-mile ahead, following the creek bed south. "We can cut him off if we circle through the canyon," Evelyn said. They changed direction, pushing the horses hard. The canyon walls rose up on either side, turning the starlight into narrow slices. Evelyn leaned low over Midnight's neck and trusted him to find his footing on the rocky ground. They emerged from the canyon right in Wade's path. The big foreman pulled up short, his horse dancing nervously. "Get out of my way." "Not a chance," Evelyn said. Wade's hand went to his belt, and Evelyn saw moonlight flash on metal. He had a knife. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, "but I will if you don't move. You've been hurting this ranch for months, stealing from Caleb, trying to destroy everything he's built. And for what? Money? For everything." Wade's face twisted with bitterness. "I worked for him for 8 years. Did everything he asked, kept this place running while he wallowed in grief over that dead wife of his. And what did I get? Same wage as every other hand, same disrespect, same nothing. So you decided to take it." "I decided to take what I deserved. This ranch should have been mine. I earned it." He spurred his horse forward. "Now move or I'll run you down." But Midnight didn't budge. The stallion stood like a stone wall, ears pinned back and muscles coiled. Wade charged. Everything happened in seconds. Midnight reared up, his front hooves lashing out. Wade's horse veered hard to avoid being struck,
stumbled in the loose rocks, and went down. Wade hit the ground hard and didn't get up. Pete jumped down to check on him. He's breathing, just knocked out. Evelyn slid off Midnight's back, her legs shaking. The horse nuzzled her shoulder and she wrapped her arms around his neck. "Good boy," she whispered. "Such a good, brave boy." They tied Wade's hands and got him draped across his horse's back. By the time they returned to the ranch, dawn was breaking and Caleb was waiting with half the ranch hands. His eyes found Evelyn first, scanning her for injury. When he saw she was unhurt, the tension in his shoulders eased slightly. "You caught him." "Midnight caught him," Evelyn corrected. "I just held on." Two of the hands took Wade to secure him properly this time. Caleb helped Evelyn down from Midnight's back, his hands gentle on her waist. "Are you all right?" "Tired, scared, but all right." She managed a small smile. "Told you I'd come back." "You did." His voice was rough. "Thank you for trusting me enough to do it." They stood there while the ranch came alive around them. Men talking, horses being unsaddled, Maria already starting breakfast. The world was moving on, but for this moment they were still. "What happens now?" Evelyn asked. "Now the sheriff deals with Wade. The ranch survives. And we—" Caleb hesitated. "We figure out what comes next. Together. If you'll let me." Evelyn looked at him, at the hope and fear and love all tangled together in his expression. She thought about the woman who'd stepped off that stagecoach wearing a wedding dress and carrying nothing but desperation, about how far she'd come and how much she'd survived. "I'll let you," she said quietly. "But Caleb, this is your last chance. You run scared again, I'm gone. Understood?" "Understood. And you have to mean it. No more walls, no more pushing me away when things get hard." "No more walls," he agreed. "I swear it." She wanted to believe him, and maybe, just maybe, she did. The sheriff arrived from Black Hollow just after noon, a grizzled man named Carson, who looked like he'd seen everything twice and been disappointed both times. He took one look at Wade's bloodied face and the evidence Caleb had assembled, then spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Wade Mercer. Always thought you were mean, but didn't figure you for stupid enough to rob the man who signs your pay." "That bastard had it coming," Wade growled from where he sat with his hands bound. "I gave him 8 years and got nothing but—" "Save it for the judge," Carson interrupted. He looked at Caleb. "You got witnesses to the theft?" "We have his records, letters proving he was selling our cattle to buyers in Mexico. And Miss Mercer here heard him confessing to the whole scheme last night." Carson's eyes shifted to Evelyn, taking in her disheveled appearance and the way she stood close to Caleb. "Miss Mercer, you're the mail-order bride who came out here a few months back." "Yes, sir." "Heard some talk in town about you, folks saying you were trouble." He studied her for a moment. "Looks like they had the wrong Mercer." Wade's face went purple. "She's been manipulating him from the start. Can't you see, what I see is a man who's going to hang for cattle rustling if he doesn't shut his mouth." Carson gestured to his deputy. "Get him loaded up. We'll take him back to town and hold him for trial." They hauled Wade to his feet. As he passed Evelyn, he spat at her feet. "You think you've won? You think he'll actually choose you?" Wade's laugh was ugly. He's scared of his own shadow. First time things get hard, he'll throw you away just like he did before. That's who Caleb Crow is. A coward who can't hold on to anything. Caleb's hand shot out and grabbed Wade by the throat, slamming him back against the wagon. "You don't get to talk about her. You don't even get to look at her. Understood?" Wade's eyes bulged, but he managed to smirk. "Truth hurts, doesn't it, boss?" The deputy pulled Caleb off before he could do real damage. They shoved Wade into the wagon and locked the restraints. Carson touched his hat brim to Evelyn. "Ma'am, Mr. Crow, I'll be in touch about the trial. Might need you both to testify." They watched the wagon roll away, dust rising in its wake. The ranch hands slowly dispersed back to their duties, leaving Caleb and Evelyn standing alone in the yard. "Is it true?" Evelyn asked quietly. "Is what true?" "What Wade said. About you being scared. About throwing me away when things get hard." Caleb was silent for a long moment. 3 days ago, I would have said no. Would have convinced myself I was just being careful, being smart. But yeah, it's true. I did exactly what he said I'd do. And now? Now I'm asking you to believe that people can change. That I can change. He turned to face her fully. "I know I don't deserve another chance. I know sorry doesn't fix what I broke. But Evelyn, I'm standing here telling you that I will spend the rest of my life proving Wade wrong if you'll let me. She wanted to believe him, but Wade's words had opened up the fear she'd been trying to ignore. That Caleb's promises were just words. That when things got difficult again, he'd retreat behind those walls and leave her out in the cold. I need time, she said, to think, to figure out if I can trust this. Pain flashed across Caleb's face, but he nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. She walked back to the house feeling like her chest had been hollowed out. Maria was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough with more force than necessary. I heard what Wade said, Maria said without looking up. Everyone heard, and I heard what Caleb promised. Question is, do you believe him? Evelyn sat down heavily at the table. I want to. But I've been unwanted my whole life, Maria. My family couldn't wait to be rid of me. Thomas Whitmore died before I could even meet him. This town looked at me like I was trash, and Caleb... Her voice cracked. Caleb looked at me like I was everything he needed, and then he looked at me like I was the enemy. How do I trust that he won't do it again? Maria stopped kneading and wiped her hands on her apron. You can't. That's the truth of it. Love is always a risk. You can't guarantee he won't hurt you again, and he can't guarantee he won't get scared. All you can do is decide if what you have is worth the risk. Is it? How do you know? You don't. Not for sure. But Mija, I watched you save that horse when everyone else wanted him dead. I watched you fight for your place here when the whole ranch tried to drive you away. You're not someone who runs from hard things, so the question isn't whether loving Caleb is risky, it's whether you're brave enough to do it anyway. Before Evelyn could respond, Pete appeared in the doorway looking agitated. Miss Mercer, we got a problem with Midnight. Her heart jumped. What kind of problem? He won't let anyone near him. We tried to check his legs after that ride last night, but he's gone wild again. Won't even let the boss approach. Evelyn was already moving toward the door. Where is he? South Corral. She ran, Maria and Pete following behind. When she reached the corral, she found Caleb and 3 ranch hands standing outside, while Midnight paced frantically inside, his eyes rolling white and his ears pinned flat. What happened? Evelyn asked. Sam tried to check his front leg, Caleb said, frustration thick in his voice. I thought he might have strained something during the chase, but the moment Sam entered the corral, Midnight went crazy, nearly kicked his head off. Evelyn watched the stallion. He was limping slightly on his right front leg, but every time someone approached the gate, he charged at the fence. He's scared, she said. He's dangerous, Sam corrected. Damn near killed me. Because you scared him. He was already hurting, and you came at him too fast. I've been handling horses for 30 years, Sam said, offended. I know how to approach a lame animal. Not this one. Evelyn started climbing over the fence. Caleb grabbed her arm. Don't. He's not in his right mind. He's in pain and he's terrified. Let me try it. Evelyn, you said you'd trust me. Prove it. Their eyes locked. She could see the fear in his expression, the urge to protect her by pulling her back to safety, but she could also see him fighting it. If he charges, Caleb said quietly, you get out. Promise me. I promise. He released her arm. Evelyn dropped into the corral and stood completely still. Midnight stopped pacing and stared at her, his breathing harsh and rapid. Hey there, brave boy, she said softly. I know it hurts. I know you're scared, but I'm not going to hurt you. You know that. The horse snorted, pawing the ground with his good leg. Remember when you were dying and I stayed with you? Remember when you trusted me enough to let me help? She took one slow step forward. I need you to trust me again. Midnight's ears flicked toward her voice. Another step. The stallion trembled but didn't retreat. That's it. That's my good boy. She reached him and placed her hand on his neck. He flinched but didn't pull away. Slowly, carefully, she ran her hands down his right leg. The moment she touched the swollen area above his hoof, Midnight jerked and tried to pull back, but Evelyn stayed with him, murmuring reassurance until he settled. It's not broken, she called to Caleb, but he's got a bad strain, probably from that terrain last night. He needs rest and cold water compresses. I can do that, Sam said, starting toward the gate. No. Evelyn's voice was firm. I'll do it. He won't let anyone else near him right now. She spent the next 2 hours in the corral with Midnight, treating his leg with cold water and wrapping it carefully. The horse stood quietly for her, though he watched every other human with suspicious eyes. Caleb stayed outside the fence the entire time, watching. When she finally climbed out, exhausted and soaking wet, he was waiting with a blanket. "You have a gift," he said, wrapping it around her shoulders. "With horses, with seeing what others miss." "I just pay attention." "It's more than that. You see the fear underneath the violence, the pain underneath the anger. You see what needs healing instead of what needs fixing." He paused. "You saw it in Midnight, and you saw it in me." Evelyn looked up at him. "Did I heal you? You made me want to be healed. That's a start." They walked back toward the house in silence. But it wasn't the cold silence of the past few days. It was something else. Something tentative, but genuine. That evening, Maria announced she was going to visit her sister in the next town for a few days. "My sister's husband broke his leg," she explained. "She needs help with the children in the house. I'll be back Sunday." Which meant Evelyn would be running the kitchen alone. The first morning without Maria was chaos. Evelyn woke at 4, started the fire in the massive stove, and tried to remember everything Maria had taught her about feeding 30 hungry men. By the time breakfast was ready, she was sweating and covered in flour, but the food was hot and plentiful. The ranch hands ate without complaint, though several of them watched her with curiosity. She was no longer the unwanted outsider, but she wasn't quite accepted either. She existed in some undefined space between employee and something more. Caleb ate silently at the end of the table, but she felt his eyes on her the entire time. After breakfast, while she was washing dishes, he appeared in the kitchen doorway. "You need help?" Evelyn nearly dropped the plate she was holding. "Since when do you help with dishes?" "Since the woman who usually does them is doing them alone." He picked up a towel and started drying. "Besides, we need to talk." Her stomach clenched. "About what?" "About where we go from here. About what happens when the trial is over and Wade's in prison and life goes back to normal." "Normal," Evelyn repeated. "What's normal?" "I don't know anymore. Before you came, normal was work and silence and trying not to feel anything, but that doesn't work anymore." "Why not?" "Because you're here. And when you're around, I feel everything." He set down a dried plate and turned to face her. "I feel angry at myself for doubting you, grateful that you stayed, terrified that you'll leave, and so much love it's like drowning sometimes." Evelyn's breath caught. "Caleb, I know I already said it, but I need you to understand. This isn't some temporary thing for me. It's not going to fade when the excitement wears off or when we have our first real fight. This is..." He struggled for words. "This is everything. You're everything." "That's a lot of pressure," she said quietly. "I know. And I don't mean to put that on you. But Evelyn, I spent 4 years convincing myself I didn't need anyone. That being alone was safer, and then you showed up and made that impossible." He took a step closer. "I'm asking you to take a chance on me. Not because I deserve it, but because what we could have together is worth the risk." She studied his face, the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the set of his jaw, the vulnerability he was finally letting her see. "I'm still angry at you," she said. "I know. And I don't forgive easily. I don't expect you to. But I'm also too stubborn to give up on something just because it's hard." She set down the dish she'd been washing. "So yes, I'll take the chance, but Caleb, if you break my trust again, I won't." "You can't promise that. No one can. But you can promise to try. To choose honesty even when it's scary. To choose me even when it would be easier to push me away. I promise," he said. And this time the words felt solid. Real. He closed the distance between them and kissed her, not desperate or urgent, but steady and sure, like a promise made with his whole body instead of just words. When they broke apart, Evelyn was breathless. "The dishes," she started, "can wait." Caleb pulled her closer. "I've spent 4 years putting work ahead of everything else. For once, it can wait." They stood there in the kitchen, holding each other while the morning sun streamed through the windows and the ranch came alive outside. It wasn't a perfect moment. Evelyn's hands were still wet. Caleb's shirt was covered in flour dust, and they both knew there were still problems to solve and wounds to heal. But it was real. And for now, that was enough. The next few days fell into a new rhythm. Evelyn ran the kitchen with help from Caleb and some of the hands. The ranch slowly recovered from Wade's sabotage. Fences were repaired, new cattle were purchased with the money Wade had been forced to return, and the burned barn was rebuilt. And every evening, Evelyn and Caleb worked with Midnight together. The stallion's leg healed well, and his trust in humans was slowly expanding beyond just Evelyn. He'd let Caleb approach now, though he was still wary of the other men. "He's ready to be ridden again," Caleb said one evening. "Want to try?" They saddled Midnight together, moving slowly and letting the horse investigate every piece of tack. When everything was secure, Caleb looked at Evelyn. "You should be the first one on his back. He trusts you most. We should ride together, like before." Something warm flickered in Caleb's eyes. "Yeah?" "Yeah." He helped her up onto Midnight's back, then swung up behind her. His arms came around her to hold the reins, and Evelyn leaned back against his chest. "Ready?" he murmured near her ear. "Ready." Midnight moved forward smoothly, his limp completely gone. They rode out past the corrals, past the barn, into the open rangeland where the grass stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The sunset was painting everything gold and red, and the air was finally starting to cool after the brutal heat of the day. "I used to hate this view," Caleb said quietly. "Why?" "Because Catherine and I would ride out here together. After she died, it just reminded me of what I'd lost." Evelyn tensed, unsure if she wanted to hear this. "But now," he continued, "when I look at it, I think about you, about the future instead of the past, and it doesn't hurt anymore." "I'm not trying to replace her," Evelyn said carefully. "I know. You couldn't if you tried. You're nothing like her." He tightened his arms slightly. Catherine was gentle and quiet. She loved this ranch but never challenged it. Never challenged me. We had a good life, but it was comfortable, safe. And I'm not safe? "You're the most dangerous thing that's ever happened to me," he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "You make me want things I thought I was done wanting. You make me feel things I thought I'd buried. You push back when I'm being an idiot, and you refuse to let me hide from the truth. Catherine never did that." Maybe she should have. Maybe, but she wasn't built that way. And I loved her for who she was. I'm not going to dishonor her memory by wishing she'd been different. He paused. "But, Evelyn, what I feel for you is different. It's not better or worse. It's just different. And I'm done feeling guilty about that." Evelyn turned slightly in the saddle to look at him. "What if I can't live up to what you need? What if I can't live up to what you need? What if we're both just stumbling around trying to figure this out and making mistakes along the way?" "Then we'd be human." "Exactly." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't need you to be perfect, Evelyn. I just need you to be here." She kissed him then, twisting in the saddle to reach him. Midnight stood perfectly still beneath them, like he understood the importance of the moment. When they finally broke apart, the sun was almost gone and the stars were beginning to appear. "We should head back," Caleb said reluctantly. But as they turned Midnight toward home, a rider appeared on the horizon, moving fast. "That's Pete," Caleb said, tension creeping into his voice. "Something's wrong." They rode to meet him. Pete's face was flushed and his horse was lathered with sweat. "Boss, you need to come back, now." "What happened?" "There's men at the ranch, 4 of them. They're saying Wade sent them to collect money he's owed. They've got guns, and they're refusing to leave until someone pays them." Caleb cursed. "How much are they asking for?" $5,000. They're claiming Wade promised them payment for helping with the rustling, and now that he's arrested, they want the money from you. Like hell, Caleb kicked Midnight into a gallop. They reached the ranch to find 4 rough-looking men standing in the yard, all of them armed. The ranch hands were gathered nearby, clearly uncertain about what to do. These men weren't rustlers caught in the act. They were just standing there, calmly demanding money they claimed they were owed. Caleb slid off Midnight's back and helped Evelyn down, then strode toward the men. "Get off my property." The tallest of them, a man with a scar running down his cheek, smiled without warmth. "Mr. Crow, we're just here for what we're owed. Wade's in jail. Whatever debts he had died with his arrest. See, that's where you're wrong. Wade hired us to move cattle. We did the work. We want to be paid." Scar's hand rested on his gun belt. "And we're not leaving until we get our money. I don't have $5,000 in cash." "Then you better find it. We'll wait." The man looked around at the ranch appreciatively. "Nice place you got here. Shame if something happened to it." The threat was clear. Caleb's jaw tightened. "You're threatening me on my own land?" "We're just having a conversation, but if that conversation doesn't end with us getting paid, well..." Scar shrugged. "Accidents happen." Sam stepped forward. "Boss, we can take them. 4 against 30, and And 4 bullets before you even reach us, Scar interrupted. Your boss here seems like a smart man. I'm betting he doesn't want to risk his men over Wade's debts. Evelyn felt ice in her stomach. These men didn't care about money. They cared about causing damage. Whether they got paid or not, they were going to hurt the ranch. Give us until tomorrow morning, Caleb said. Why would we do that? Because if you shoot anyone here, you'll hang for murder. But if you give me time to get the money together, you walk away clean and everyone lives. Scar considered this. Tomorrow morning, sunrise. You have the money, we leave. You don't? He smiled. We'll discuss alternative payment methods. The 4 men walked to their horses and rode off toward the tree line at the edge of the property. They'd wait there until morning, watching to make sure no one went for help. Caleb gathered the ranch hands in the barn. We don't have $5,000 in cash, he said bluntly. Even if I sold every horse and cow we own, it would take weeks to raise that kind of money, so we need another plan. We could ambush them, one of the hands suggested. Take them out before sunrise. And if we miss even one, he'll shoot first and we'll have dead men on our hands. Caleb shook his head. I won't risk it. So what do we do? Sam asked. Let them take whatever they want? No. Evelyn stepped forward. We give them what they're really after. Everyone turned to look at her. They don't actually want money, she continued. They want the ranch to fail. Wade must have promised them a cut if this place went bankrupt and got sold cheap. Now that he's arrested, they're trying to finish what he started. So? So we convince them the ranch already failed, that there's nothing left worth taking. Caleb caught on immediately. Make them think we're broke, that Wade already bled us dry. Exactly. We move the good horses out tonight to the north pasture, hide anything valuable, make it look like we're one step away from foreclosure. Evelyn looked at Caleb. If they think there's nothing left to steal and no money to collect, they'll cut their losses and leave. Or they'll burn the place down out of spite, Sam said darkly. Maybe, but it's better than letting them extort us or starting a gunfight. Caleb was quiet for a moment, thinking it through. Then he nodded. Do it. Move the horses tonight. Make sure those men see us struggling. And Sam, send someone to Black Hollow for the sheriff. Quietly. If we can stall them until Carson gets here with deputies, we might end this without bloodshed. They worked through the night. The best horses were quietly moved to distant pastures where the watching men wouldn't see. Valuable equipment was hidden in the root cellar. And Caleb went through his office, pulling out ledgers that showed the ranch deep in debt, which wasn't entirely a lie after Wade's theft. Just before sunrise, the 4 men rode back into the yard. Caleb met them looking exhausted and defeated. I don't have the money. We figured. Scar looked around at the ranch. So let's talk about payment and trade. There's nothing to trade. Wade stole everything that wasn't nailed down. The bank is threatening to foreclose. I can barely make payroll. That's real sad, Mr. Crow, but it's not our problem. Then what do you want? You can shoot me, but you can't get blood from a stone. The ranch is broke. Scar's eyes narrowed, clearly trying to determine if this was true. Show me the books. Caleb led them into his office. For 20 tense minutes, the men examined the ledgers while Evelyn and the ranch hands waited outside. Finally, Scar emerged looking disgusted. Wade was an idiot. Told us this place was worth a fortune. It was, before he ruined it. The 4 men conferred quietly. Then Scar turned back to Caleb. We'll take the black stallion, the one that's worth killing for. Wade said he's the most valuable animal on the property. Evelyn's blood ran cold. No. Not your choice, sweetheart. Scar smiled at her. That horse is worth at least $2,000. We'll take him and call the debt settled. He's not for sale, Caleb said. Didn't say he was. We're taking him as payment. Scar drew his gun. Now where is he? No one spoke. I asked a question. And I'm not answering, Caleb said quietly. You want to shoot me? Go ahead. But you're not touching that horse. The tension in the yard stretched tighter than wire. Evelyn could see Scar calculating his options. He could shoot Caleb, but then he'd have 30 angry ranch hands to deal with, and he still wouldn't know where midnight was. Boss! Pete's voice rang out from the road. Sheriff's coming! Dust rose in the distance, multiple riders approaching fast. Scar cursed. This isn't over. Yeah, it is, Caleb said. Get off my land, and if you ever come back, I'll shoot you myself. The 4 men mounted their horses and rode hard in the opposite direction. Within minutes, Sheriff Carson arrived with 4 deputies. Got your message, he said. Looks like we missed the excitement. They just left. heading east toward the county line. We'll catch 'em. Carson tipped his hat. Good work, Mr. Crow. Most men would have just paid them off and hoped they'd disappear. Most men don't have Evelyn Mercer on their side. Carson's weathered face creased into something that might have been a smile. I'm starting to see that. Ma'am. He nodded to Evelyn, then rode off with his deputies in pursuit. The ranch hands slowly dispersed, talking among themselves about the close call. Sam clapped Caleb on the shoulder. That was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the stupidest. Probably both, Caleb admitted. When they were finally alone, Evelyn turned to him. You would have let them shoot you before you told them where midnight was. Yeah, that was stupid. I know. That horse isn't worth dying for. Caleb looked at her steadily. He is to you. And anything that matters to you matters to me. Even if it's a temperamental stallion with trust issues. Evelyn felt tears burning in her eyes. You're an idiot, so you keep telling me. He pulled her close. But I'm your idiot. If you'll have me. She buried her face in his chest, breathing in the scent of leather and dust and safety. I'll have you. They stood there in the morning sun while the ranch settled back into its normal rhythm around them. The danger had passed. Wade was in jail. The men who'd threatened them were being hunted by the law. For the first time since she'd arrived in Texas, Evelyn felt like maybe, just maybe, things were actually going to be all right. Marry me, Caleb said suddenly. Evelyn pulled back to stare at him. What? Marry me. Not because you're desperate or because you have nowhere else to go. Marry me because you want to. Because you love me and I love you, and because we're better together than we are apart. Caleb, we just almost got killed. I know. And all I could think about while those men were threatening us was that I've wasted so much time being scared. Time I could have spent making you happy. Building a life with you. He cupped her face in his hands. I don't want to waste any more time. So yes, I'm asking you to marry me while we're both covered in dirt and exhausted and probably not thinking clearly. Because this is who we are. Messy and imperfect and stubborn as hell. And I want that. I want you. Evelyn's heart was hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. This is crazy. Is that a yes or a no? She looked at this man who'd hired her when he didn't want to, who'd worked beside her with broken horses, who just risked his life to protect something that mattered to her. This complicated, damaged, impossible man who somehow saw her more clearly than anyone ever had. It's a yes, she whispered. You stubborn, impossible, wonderful man. It's a yes. Caleb kissed her like the world was ending, and she was the only thing keeping him grounded. And Evelyn kissed him back with everything she had, pouring 4 months of struggle and fear and hope into it. When they finally broke apart, the ranch hands were watching from a distance. Sam started a slow clap that quickly spread until everyone was cheering. Maria's voice carried across the yard. About damn time! Evelyn laughed, tears streaming down her face. I thought you were visiting your sister. Came back early. Figured you two idiots might need supervision? Maria walked over and pulled Evelyn into a fierce hug. Welcome to the family, mija. We're not married yet. Details. Maria waved a hand dismissively. You've been part of this place since the day you arrived. The wedding is just making it official. As the sun climbed higher and the celebration continued around them, Evelyn leaned against Caleb and let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd come to Texas as an unwanted bride with $17 and a trunk full of broken dreams. She'd been rejected, humiliated, suspected, and threatened. And somehow, impossibly, she'd found home. Not in a place or a building, but in this, in the man beside her, in the work they'd do together, in the life they'd build from the ruins of their separate pasts. It wasn't perfect. It probably never would be. But it was real, and it was theirs, and for the first time in her life, that felt like enough. The wedding was nothing like the one Evelyn had imagined when she'd sewn that cream-colored dress back in Philadelphia. There was no church full of strangers pretending to be happy for her. No family members attending out of obligation while secretly relieved to be rid of her. No elaborate ceremony designed to impress people who didn't actually care. Instead, 3 weeks after Caleb's proposal, Evelyn stood on the porch of the ranch house wearing a simple blue dress Maria had helped her make. Her hair was loose around her shoulders because Caleb had mentioned once that he liked it that way. And the only people present were the ranch hands, Maria, Reverend Hartley from Black Hollow, and Sheriff Carson, who'd become something of a friend after Wade's arrest. Midnight stood in the nearby corral, fully healed and watching the proceedings with what Evelyn swore was approval.
You ready? Maria asked, adjusting the wildflowers they'd woven into Evelyn's hair. I think so. Evelyn's hands were shaking slightly. Is it normal to be this scared? If you weren't scared, I'd be worried. Getting married is terrifying. You're trusting someone with your whole future. Maria squeezed her hand. But Mija, if anyone's earned that trust, it's Caleb. Evelyn nodded, trying to believe it. The past 3 weeks had been good, better than good. Caleb had been patient, attentive, and more open than she'd ever seen him. They'd worked together to repair the damage Wade had done, both to the ranch and to the trust between them. But standing here about to marry him, all her old fears came rushing back. What if she wasn't enough? What if he woke up one day and regretted choosing her? What if she'd spent her whole life being unwanted for a reason she couldn't see? Stop it, Maria said, reading her expression. Whatever you're thinking, stop it. What if I mess this up? Then you mess it up, and then you fix it. That's what marriage is, two imperfect people choosing each other over and over again, even when it's hard. Maria's eyes were suspiciously bright. Now get out there before that man thinks you've run off. Evelyn walked around the house to where everyone was gathered in the yard. The ranch hands had cleaned up impressively, faces scrubbed, shirts pressed, hats in hand. They stood in a loose semicircle around the makeshift altar Pete and Sam had built from hay bales and pine branches. And there was Caleb, waiting for her. He wore a black suit she'd never seen before, probably pulled from the back of a closet and dusted off for the occasion. His hair was neatly combed, his jaw freshly shaved, but it was his eyes that stopped her, dark and intense and full of something that took her breath away. He looked at her like she was the answer to every question he'd ever asked. Evelyn walked toward him with her heart in her throat. When she reached him, he took her hands and she felt the slight tremor in his grip. He was just as nervous as she was. You look beautiful, he said quietly. You clean up pretty well yourself. Reverend Hartley cleared his throat. Shall we begin? The ceremony was short and simple. No elaborate vows or lengthy speeches, just the essential words that would bind them together legally and spiritually. But when it came time for their personal vows, Caleb surprised her. I'm not good with words, he started, his voice rough, and I'm going to mess this up. But Evelyn, 4 months ago, you showed up here with nothing but a trunk and more courage than I've ever seen. You could have given up 100 times, should have given up, probably, but you didn't. He took a breath, steadying himself. You saved a horse everyone wanted dead. You saved this ranch when I was too blind to see it was being destroyed. And you saved me from a life of just existing instead of living. His hands tightened on hers. I can't promise I won't get scared sometimes. Can't promise I won't mess up or say the wrong thing or forget to tell you how much you mean to me. But I can promise that I will choose you. Every single day for the rest of my life, I will choose you. Evelyn felt tears streaming down her face. She'd prepared her own vows, practiced them in her room, but standing here looking at him, all those carefully chosen words disappeared. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, she said, her voice shaking. I was desperate and scared and convinced I'd never be anything but unwanted. And then you gave me a chance. Not because you wanted to, but because I made you see something worth saving. She had to pause to swallow the lump in her throat. You're difficult and stubborn and emotionally unavailable half the time. You work too hard and you don't talk about your feelings, and you still look at me sometimes like you can't believe I'm real. She smiled through her tears. But you're also the bravest person I know, because it takes real courage to love someone after you've lost everything. And Caleb, you love fiercely. You love completely. And I am so lucky to be loved by you. She saw him blink hard, fighting his own tears. So I promise to be patient when you get scared, to push back when you're being an idiot, to stand beside you when everything falls apart, and to choose you every single day, even when it would be easier to walk away. Reverend Hartley was wiping his own eyes. Well, I think that about covers it. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Texas, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb, you may kiss your bride. Caleb pulled Evelyn close and kissed her like they were the only two people in the world. The ranch hands erupted in cheers and whistles, but Evelyn barely heard them. All she could feel was this, his arms around her, his lips on hers, the solid certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. When they finally broke apart, Maria was openly crying, and even tough old Sam looked suspiciously emotional. Congratulations, boss, Pete said, grinning. You got yourself a hell of a woman. Don't I know it?
Caleb replied, not taking his eyes off Evelyn. They celebrated with a simple meal Maria had prepared: roasted beef, fresh bread, vegetables from the garden. The ranch hands told increasingly embarrassing stories about Caleb, and Evelyn laughed until her sides hurt. As the sun began to set, Sheriff Carson pulled Caleb aside. "Got some news about Wade," he said. "Trial's set for next month. They're charging him with cattle-rustling arson and conspiracy to defraud. He's looking at 20 years minimum." Caleb nodded. "Good. There's something else. Those 4 men who came demanding money? We caught them trying to cross into Mexico. They're being charged too. Whole operation Wade had going is falling apart." "What about the cattle he sold? Any chance of recovering them?" "Some. Mexican buyers we contacted are willing to return what they can verify came from your ranch. Won't be all of it, but it's something." Carson clapped him on the shoulder. "You're going to be all right, Caleb. Ranch will recover. You've got good people working for you." "I know. Thanks, Carson." After the sheriff left, Caleb found Evelyn standing by Midnight's corral, watching the stars emerge. "You all right?" he asked, coming to stand beside her. "Just thinking about how different everything is from 4 months ago." She leaned against his shoulder. "I was so scared then, so sure I'd fail at this." "You haven't failed at anything." "Haven't I? I nearly got you killed, twice. You saved my life, and my ranch, and my ability to feel anything other than grief." He wrapped his arm around her waist. "You know what Wade said to me right before they took him away?" "What?" "He said I'd regret choosing you, that you'd destroy everything I'd built, just like Catherine's death destroyed me." Caleb's voice was quiet. "And you want to know the truth? He was right about one thing. You did destroy everything." Evelyn's breath caught. "You destroyed the walls I'd built around my heart. The belief that being alone was safer than risking pain. The idea that work was enough to fill a life." He turned her to face him. "You destroyed the man I was and helped build someone better. Someone who can actually feel again. And I'll never regret that. Even when I'm being impossible? Especially then." He kissed her forehead. "Come on. I want to show you something." He led her to the main house, up the stairs to the 2nd floor. There was a door at the end of the hall she'd never seen open. "This was Catherine's studio," Caleb said, his hand on the doorknob. "After she died, I locked it up and never went back in. Couldn't face it." "Caleb, you don't have to." "I want to." He opened the door. The room beyond was full of dusty canvases and dried-out paint supplies. Sketches covered the walls, landscapes mostly, and portraits of horses. Catherine had been talented. "She loved to paint," Caleb said, looking around. "Could spend hours up here, completely lost in it. After the accident, I couldn't stand to see her work. It reminded me too much of what I'd lost." He walked to the window and looked out at the ranch bathed in moonlight. "But tonight, standing in here with you, I don't feel that pain anymore. I just feel grateful that I got to love her, that I learned what love looked like from her, and that she showed me it was possible to build a life with someone." He turned back to Evelyn. "I want to turn this into something new, maybe a library or a sitting room or whatever you want it to be, because holding on to the past isn't honoring Catherine's memory. It's just being too afraid to move forward. And I'm done being afraid." Evelyn crossed the room and took his hands. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." He squeezed her fingers. "Catherine would have liked you, I think. She would have appreciated your stubbornness, your refusal to let me wallow, your courage." "I'm not that brave." "Yes, you are. You're the bravest person I know. And Evelyn, I need you to understand something. Loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for Catherine. It doesn't replace it or erase it. It's just different, new, and that's okay." Evelyn felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. "I was so worried I'd always be competing with a ghost." "You're not competing with anyone. You're just you, and that's more than enough." They stood there in the dusty studio, holding each other while the moon rose higher and the ranch settled into sleep around them. The next morning, Evelyn woke in Caleb's bed, their bed now, to find him already awake, watching her. "How long have you been staring at me?" she asked, stretching. "Long enough to confirm you snore." "I do not." "You absolutely do. Like a tiny, adorable saw, cutting through wood." She smacked his shoulder playfully. "Take it back. Make me." What followed was undignified and involved considerable laughter and ended with them both breathless and tangled in sheets.
We should get up, Evelyn said eventually. The men will need breakfast. Let them wait. Caleb,
I'm serious. For once in my life, I'm putting something ahead of work. And that something is my wife. He pulled her closer. Who, by the way, snores. I'm going to smother you with a pillow. Worth it. They did eventually get up, though much later than usual. The ranch hands gave them knowing looks at breakfast, but wisely kept their comments to themselves. The following week settled into a new rhythm. Evelyn continued to manage the kitchen with Maria, but now she also worked with the horses alongside Caleb. They discovered she had a real gift for training, not just Midnight, but the other difficult animals that came through the ranch. Word spread. Ranchers from neighboring properties started bringing their problem horses to Crow Ranch, willing to pay good money for Evelyn's services. The income helped offset the losses from Wade's theft. You're building a reputation, Caleb told her one evening as they worked with a skittish mare someone had brought from 3 counties away. People are calling you the horse whisperer. That's ridiculous. Is it? You've rehabilitated 8 horses in 2 months, horses their owners had given up on. He watched as she calmed the mare with just her voice and gentle touch. You have something special, Evelyn. You should use it. I am using it. I mean, officially, we could expand the ranch operations, focus on horse training alongside cattle, build something that's yours. Evelyn looked at him in surprise. You do that? It's not doing anything. It's recognizing what you're already doing and giving it the support it deserves. He moved closer. This ranch is ours now. Not mine. Ours. Which means your dreams matter just as much as mine. It was such a simple statement, but it hit Evelyn like a physical blow. No one had ever said her dreams mattered before. Her family had dismissed them. Thomas Whitmore had never even lived long enough to ask what they were. But Caleb, difficult, emotionally stunted Caleb, understood instinctively that partnership meant building something together. Okay, she said, let's do it. They spent the next month drawing up plans. They'd keep the cattle operation, but they'd also officially establish Crow Ranch as a training facility for difficult horses. They'd need to build new corrals, hire additional hands who understood training work, and advertise their services. It was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious for a ranch still recovering from Wade's sabotage. But working on it together, planning their future side by side, felt like the most natural thing in the world. One afternoon, as they were measuring out space for the new training corrals, a fancy carriage rolled up the drive. Evelyn shaded her eyes against the sun. Are we expecting anyone? Not that I know of. The carriage door opened and a well-dressed woman in her 50s stepped out, followed by a younger woman who looked vaguely familiar. Evelyn Mercer, the older woman called. It's Evelyn Crow now, Evelyn replied, walking over. Can I help you? The woman's face transformed with relief. Oh, thank heavens. We've been looking everywhere for you. I'm Margaret Whitmore. Thomas was my brother. Everything stopped. Thomas's sister? Evelyn repeated numbly. Yes, and this is his daughter, Clara. We only just learned about his death and his arrangement to bring you here as his bride. We came as soon as we could. Clara stepped forward, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. Father never told us he'd sent for a mail-order bride. We found your letters in his desk after he passed. I'm so sorry you came all this way for nothing. Evelyn didn't know what to say. It wasn't for nothing. Margaret looked around the ranch with obvious surprise. You stayed, even after Thomas died. She did more than stay, Caleb said, coming to stand beside Evelyn. She built a life here. I'm Caleb Crow, Evelyn's husband. Oh. Margaret's expression shifted to confusion. But I thought, we came to offer you compensation. Thomas left a will. He had savings set aside for you, $3,000. We wanted to make sure you received it, even though the marriage never happened. $3,000. The amount stole Evelyn's breath. That kind of money could have changed everything 4 months ago. Could have given her choices, freedom, a fresh start anywhere she wanted. That's very generous, she managed, but I can't accept it. Why not? It was meant for you. Thomas would have wanted his daughter to have it. Evelyn interrupted gently, looking at Clara. He sent for me because he needed help raising you, didn't he? That's why he wanted a wife. Clara nodded, tears spilling over. After Mother died, he tried so hard, but he didn't know how to talk to me, how to help me through the grief. I think he thought a woman's presence would make things better. Then use that money for her education, Evelyn said. Or her future, whatever she needs. Because that's what Thomas would have actually wanted. For his daughter to be taken care of. Margaret stared at her. You'd really turn down $3,000? I don't need it. Evelyn looked at Caleb, then at the ranch spread out around them. I have everything I need right here. After the Whitmores left, with Clara hugging Evelyn and thanking her for understanding, Caleb pulled her close. You just turned down more money than most people see in a lifetime. I know. Any regrets? Evelyn thought about it. 4 months ago, that money would have represented salvation, a way out of desperation and into possibility. But now? No regrets. That money was never mine. And besides, she smiled up at him. I'd rather have this, us, the life we're building. You can't buy that. You're remarkable. You know that? I'm practical. There's a difference. No, you're remarkable, and I love you. Even though I snore? Especially because you snore. She kissed him there in the yard, not caring that ranch hands were probably watching. Let them watch. She'd stopped being ashamed of wanting things, of claiming her place in this world. The training operation launched officially in the fall. By winter, they had a waiting list of horses needing rehabilitation. The ranch was thriving in ways it never had before, not just financially, but in spirit. The men who worked there were happy. Maria sang while she cooked. Even Midnight seemed more content, now that he had a purpose beyond just surviving. And Evelyn finally understood something she'd spent her whole life searching for. Home wasn't a place someone gave you. It wasn't a wedding dress or a husband or a fancy house. Home was what you built with your own hands when you refused to give up. It was the people who chose to stand beside you when things got hard. It was knowing your worth even when the whole world tried to convince you otherwise. One evening, 6 months after the wedding, Evelyn and Caleb sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible colors. Remember when you first got here? Caleb asked. You were so determined, so fierce, even when everyone wanted you gone. I didn't have a choice. It was fight or give up completely. You always had a choice. You could have gone back to Philadelphia, could have found work in another town, could have married someone safe and boring who would have given you security without risk. He took her hand. But you stayed. You fought. And you changed everything. We changed everything, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this alone. Maybe not. But Evelyn, you were the catalyst. You're the reason this ranch feels alive again. The reason I feel alive again. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching Midnight graze peacefully in the nearby pasture. The stallion who'd been too dangerous to save, the man who'd been too broken to love, and the woman who'd refused to accept that anything was beyond redemption. Do you think we'll always be this happy? She asked quietly. No. We'll have hard times. We'll fight. We'll hurt each other without meaning to. We'll face droughts and debt and disasters we can't predict. Caleb squeezed her hand. But we'll face them together. And that's what matters. He was right, Evelyn knew. Life wasn't a fairy tale where everything worked out perfectly. It was messy and complicated and full of unexpected turns. But maybe that was okay. Maybe the point wasn't to find perfect happiness. It was to find someone worth fighting through the imperfect times with. I'm glad I got on that stagecoach, she said. Even though Thomas was dead and I had nothing and everyone looked at me like I was trash. I'm glad I came here. So am I. Best thing that ever happened to this ranch was you showing up in that wedding dress looking scared and determined and too stubborn to know when to quit. I knew when to quit. I just chose not to. Exactly. He kissed the top of her head. That's my girl. Never knowing when to quit. They sat there as the stars emerged, one by one, turning the Texas sky into something vast and beautiful and full of possibility. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. Closer by, the horses moved quietly in their corrals. And inside the house, Maria was probably already preparing tomorrow's bread dough, muttering to herself about stubborn people who didn't know when to come inside. This was her life now. Not the one she'd imagined when she was young and naive. Not the one her family had planned for her, but the one she'd fought for, brick by brick, day by day, until it became something real and solid and hers. And maybe that was the real lesson in all of this, that worth wasn't something someone else gave you. It was something you claimed for yourself. That home wasn't a destination you arrived at. It was something you built with courage and stubbornness, and the refusal to believe you deserved less than everything. Evelyn had arrived in Black Hollow as nobody. A desperate woman in a wedding dress, carrying a battered trunk and $17. But she'd become someone, not because a man had married her, or because she'd found wealth, or because the town had finally accepted her, but because she'd looked at herself in the mirror, scared and angry and unwanted, and decided that wasn't the end of her story. She'd saved a horse everyone wanted dead. She'd saved a ranch everyone thought was doomed. She'd saved a man who'd convinced himself he was better off alone. And in the process, she'd saved herself. That was worth more than any amount of money, more than any fairy tale ending, more than anything she could have imagined when she'd first stepped off that stagecoach into the dust and heat of a dying Texas town. "What are you thinking about?" Caleb asked, sensing her mood shift. "Just that I love you. And I love this life we're building. And I love that I get to wake up every morning and choose it all over again. That's a lot of love. I've got a lot to give. Turns out when you spend your whole life being told you're not worth much, you save up all that love for when you finally find something worth spending it on." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you were never unwanted. You were just waiting for the right people to recognize your worth. And we're the lucky ones who finally did." Evelyn felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears. Happy tears. The kind that came from finally feeling like you belonged somewhere. "Come on," Caleb said, standing and pulling her to her feet. "Let's go inside. Maria will skin us alive if we miss dinner." They walked toward the house, hand in hand, leaving the sunset behind them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always new challenges. But tonight, they had this: each other. A home built from nothing but determination and hope. And the bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Because that's what love was, in the end. Not the absence of fear or struggle or pain, but the presence of someone who looked at you, all your broken pieces and sharp edges and difficult parts, and chose you anyway. Evelyn Mercer had been unwanted for 26 years. But Evelyn Crow, horse trainer, ranch owner, wife to a difficult man and friend to damaged creatures, she was wanted, needed, valued, and that made all the difference. The dying frontier town of Black Hollow had given her nothing but rejection when she'd arrived wearing that cream-colored wedding dress. But Crow Ranch had given her everything that mattered. Not because it was easy or comfortable or what she'd planned, but because she'd earned it. Every stubborn, difficult, beautiful piece of it. And as she walked into the house with Caleb's hand warm in hers, and Maria's voice calling them to dinner, and Midnight's contented snort drifting through the open window, Evelyn finally understood what she'd been searching for her entire life. Not acceptance from people who didn't matter. Not validation from a world that would never understand her worth. Not even love from someone who saw her as less than she was. She'd been searching for the courage to see herself clearly, to fight for what she deserved, to build something from nothing and refuse to apologize for taking up space in a world that tried to make her small. And she'd found it. Not in a person or a place, but in herself. Everything else, Caleb, the ranch, Midnight, the life they were building, that was just the reward for finally learning that she'd been worth fighting for all along.